Good evening and welcome to the April 24th meeting of the Livermore City Council. I now call the meeting to order. Let the roll call show that all of the members are present and accounted for. I ask that you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, question for the city attorney. Was there any reportable action taken in closed session?
Mr. Mayor, no, there was not.
Okay, very good. Thank you. On to proclamations and presentations. Proclamation declaring May 21st through May 27th the National Public Works Week. And this is recognized the tremendous amount of work that is done, and what really people don't, they're not that aware of what's going on. They're just using all the facilities, and it all works, and it works so well that the people don't pay attention to it. But we're calling attention to it tonight. That whereas public works services in the Livermore community are an integral part of our residents' everyday lives, and their health, safety, and comfort depends on these facilities and services. And whereas the support of an understanding and informed community is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, sewer, streets, landscaping, public buildings, solid waste and recyclables collection, and airport operations. And whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities and services are vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of the members of the Livermore Public Works Department. And whereas this year the American Public Works Association declared the week of May 21st through the 27th, 2017 as National Public Works Week in recognition of the importance of the hard work and dedication of public works personnel. And whereas on May 24th, 2017, the Public Works Department will host an open house at the Maintenance Service Center located at 3500 Robertson Park Road from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., where the public is invited to tour the facility and learn about the various ways that Public Works employees keep the residents of Livermore safe. That's a lot of fun. May 24th, get down there and see that, because it's pretty remarkable. You see how all of these really kind of cool pieces of equipment work. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Livermore proclaims the week of May 21st through the 27th as National Public Works Week and encourages residents to recognize the contributions that Public Works staff make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. And I believe Darren Greenwood is in the audience.
Wow, applause and everything. Thank you very much, Mayor. And just a reminder, like the Mayor said, on the 24th, please come down and join us at the Maintenance Service Center and take a tour and meet all the staff and see all the cool equipment that we have. Thank you very much.
Actually, last time I was down there, they had a sewer cam, and it's a little tiny camera that's on wheels, and it's remote controlled, and you can actually drive this thing through the sewers and see if there's any cracks or breaks in the line. And it's really kind of cool. You got a little joystick, and you're driving the thing down. I'm a chemist. Some of this stuff kind of excites me, and so with that, we also have a proclamation recognizing Small Business Week. This is April 30th through May 6th. And whereas during Small Business Week, we honor the courage, tenacity, and innovation of the small business men and women in Livermore, as their dedication and entrepreneurial spirit keep the American dream alive and our economy growing stronger. And whereas America's millions of small business owners and entrepreneurs reflect the characteristics that make our nation great: vision, responsibility, innovation, dedication, and hard work. It is often small entrepreneurs who are our inventors, our risk takers, and our job creators. Whereas small business owners are a vital part of our nation's economy, who represent over 99% of all employer firms, who employ half of all private sector employees, pay more than 45% of the total U.S. private payroll, and who have generated over 60% of new jobs annually over the past decade. And whereas Small Business Week is a time to celebrate our successes and to thank Livermore's small business owners for their contributions to our community, our economy, and our nation. Now, therefore, the City Council proclaims April 30th through May 6th, 2017 as Small Business Week in Livermore and encourages residents to learn more about America's entrepreneurs and how we can support them. And of course, you vote with your wallet. So vote locally and support local businesses. And we have Brendan Finley from the Chamber of Commerce here to accept.
Everybody knows by now I need to have notes. So well, first want to thank the City Council. Thank you for recognizing us here, as well as want to appreciate the partnership with you, the city departments, in support of local businesses. This includes the City Manager's Office, Public Works, Fire and Police, Community Development, and especially the Office of Innovation and Economic Development. Whether through the Chamber or individually, coordination and collaboration with our city government is an important factor for attracting and keeping businesses in the community. Of our 650 members we have in the Chamber, 544 of these members have less than 500 employees, and 82% of those have 20 or fewer employees. Small business plays a big role in the service industry as well as in the supply chain for big businesses such as manufacturing, science, and technology. As part of the Chamber's objective is to promote, educate, and advocate for its members, and we're pleased to support the City of Livermore in its collaboration. So also the Tri-Valley Commerce Con Cyber Savvy Edition event is next Wednesday, May 3rd, as part of this week's celebration. So that's going to be at the Shannon Center in Dublin from 8:30 to noon. These events are popular with small businesses, as well as they include resources and experts on a range of topics that are important to small businesses. Also on May 4th, the Chamber will recognize one of our Chamber members, Amos Productions, as its nominee for the annual Small Business Awards hosted by the East Bay Chamber. So we're excited to be part of that as well. This Small Business Award will be given to a small business, and Jody has less than 24 employees and is very well known here in the community. So I want to again thank you for your recognition, and we're glad to be part of you here in the city. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Let's hear for the Chamber. Okay, well, that's it for the proclamations and presentations for tonight. Moving on to the Citizens Forum. These are for, oops. Oh, you know what? You're right. I skipped right over that. The Commission for the Arts annual update. And I saw Monya Lane in the back, the commission chair, and skipped right over that. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I will make my comments brief. Appreciate the opportunity to give an update on the Commission for the Arts activities as one of your advisory groups. In 2007, as you know, the City of Livermore developed the Arts Alive Cultural Arts Plan, and since then has strategically used cultural arts as a really important part of the city's economic development. The Commission for the Arts is particularly charged with oversight for public art, including a strategy for city arts projects, evaluating quarterly funding proposals, and approving public art proposals by developers. The Commission's also responsible for updating the Arts Alive document. This past year, 2 Commission themes have been visibility for public art in Livermore and a focus on youth. Funding from the Commission has included the Pacific Chamber Orchestra Assemblies in Elementary Schools, the Shazanami Foundation Diversity Project at the library, the Poet Laureate Science Poetry Contest, the Livermore Amador Symphony Youth Orchestra Summer Program, Livermore School of Dance Ballet on the Green, the Livermore Art Association's Hanging Art Display System, LVPAC's 2017 Art Walk, the Livermore Valley Opera Program at elementary schools, and awards to 10 high school seniors who excel in the visual, performing, or literary arts. The City Council has also recently approved the 4 downtown sculptures that we've been orchestrating. Thank you very much. And our staff liaison is now coordinating purchase and delivery of the sculptures, and engineering staff is in the process of preparing a bid package that will include the cement foundations and installation of the sculptures. We also have 2 new openings on the Commission and want to note that this is an opportunity to increase the diversity of members on the commission so that the Commission for the Arts is truly representative of our community. You know, I recently heard that Las Positas students can get internship credit for commission-type experience, so I'm following up on that, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to add student perspective to the commission in that way as well. For our go-forward activities, of course, we'll work with staff as the 4 sculptures are installed downtown, and this has been well received by business owners in the area. Next, we're drafting a tile mural RFP with a modern design, and staff is contacting the building owner that we have in mind, so stay tuned for that. We're also working on a way to enhance the Livermore Public Art Guide on the city's website with more interactive elements. We'd like to include audio and video walking tour guides and a smartphone app with links describing each artwork and the corresponding artist. We're assisting council in the selection of the city's 4th poet laureate, whose term begins July 1st, and we plan to connect more closely with him or her to promote the literary arts in our community. Last but not least, we'll be updating the now 10-year-old Arts Alive Cultural Arts Plan for Livermore, an excellent document which has really stood the test of time with criteria that we still use on the Commission for the Arts in evaluating grants proposals today. The city has implemented many aspects of the Cultural Arts Plan, and we're excited to have the opportunity to take this to the next level in gathering community input, partnering with the local arts organizations, and pulling together whatever are the city's aspirations for what it wants to be in cultural arts 5 to 10 years from now, and then bringing some options back to you on the City Council later this year. We will be following a process that Pleasanton successfully used in updating their cultural arts plan 2 years ago, including use of a consultant in gathering broad community input, which is so important. In addition, several of the commissioners and staff have the opportunity to attend the Americans for the Arts Conference, because this year it's in San Francisco in June. So we'll have an opportunity to gather input from other communities on their public arts programs to see what we might use that's of interest to us here in Livermore. So in summary, the Commission for the Arts has a busy year ahead. We greatly look forward to working with the city to continue to build this distinctive cultural identity that now attracts so many people to Livermore. Thank you very much for your support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions? Unquestionably, the arts contribute to the quality of life here in Livermore, and I felt very privileged to have been able to have worked on the first Cultural Arts Master Plan, and have been very excited to see how the Commission for the Arts has taken that and run with it. And particularly this year, where we're going to have 4 very noticeable results from some of the work that you've been doing for a long time. It was nice to have finally have those installed in the downtown. And that wasn't your fault. That was just a whole bunch of other stuff that got in the way. But thank you for your perseverance on that, and it's going to be really exciting in the next year as we continue to move ahead. So it does great for our quality of life, and also it's an economic driver as well. So thank you very much for your time and effort on that.
Thank you all.
Yes. Okay, now we're moving on to, thank you again. But the Citizens Forum, these are items that are not on the council agenda. They're typically, the City Council cannot deliberate nor take action on anything that's brought up during the Citizens Forum. And we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. We have Dave McGuigan, Juan Lan Shao, and Bruce Shore. Mr. McGuigan.
David McGuigan. Now that we know that you endorse the actions of your police, let's not ignore their penchant for underage prostitutes, shall we? There's a couple of things to remember about that incident. First, it was the girl who came forward once she turned 18. It's not like they voluntarily cleaned up their act. Second, you don't get that kind of abhorrent behavior without a corrupt corporate culture to nurture it. Of course, corporate culture is something Livermore is all too well known for. It wasn't all that long ago we had a deputy superintendent of schools running around making all sorts of outrageous purchases with a school district credit card, including 2 tickets to the play Cats in San Francisco. When questioned, the superintendent told the public that the tickets were for a school field trip and therefore appropriate. Problem is, there was no legally required permission slips, and not a single student could be found who went on the field trip. Being lied to by our community leaders and our elected officials endorsing it is what Livermore is known for. Sadly, experience tells us finding problems in Livermore's corporate culture is like finding sand at the beach. All you have to do is decide to go to the beach. Of course, Livermore's corporate culture is set by our mayor, who is all too gleeful in ridiculing people by lying about tax consequences or disparaging the city of Cleveland. You can be sure that if you express dissatisfaction, you'll face the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. But I must say, I didn't expect you to be so thoroughly endorse the police. Sure, the lying is right in Livermore's wheelhouse, but the underage prostitutes? Okay, I have to ask, are the police bringing you some of that special sweetness on the side? That certainly would explain your unmitigated endorsement for a bunch of lying pedophiles. This is a letter to the chief.
Excuse me, point of order on that. Mr. City Attorney. Referring to our police officers as pedophiles, I'm sorry, I believe that crosses the bar.
I think the admonition would be for Mr. McGuigan to complete his comments and to avoid inflammatory language that could be disparaging to individuals or in the sense that could lead them into disrepute. Commenting upon their conduct is one thing. Calling them names or something like that or a communicable disease is something that could expose you to personal liability. So I just want to make sure.
Communicable disease?
There are various cases that say you have a great deal of discretion. Please hold this time for a moment. You have the opportunity to address the council on any matter within its subject matter jurisdiction. I'd like to advise you, though, that if you make disparaging comments about a particular individual, you may face individual liability, particularly if you were to say someone is a pedophile, if you were to say that someone is has contracted a communicable disease. There is case law on point on that. So I would request that you direct your comments to council and conduct yourself accordingly.
And the term was in the plural, police officers as pedophiles.
When they are charged with accessing an underage prostitute, underage children is, by definition, pedophilia.
Mr.
So I'm
Mayor,
sorry.
if I may speak to that particular item.
Please.
If Mr. McGuigan, if you're referring to former officer Dan Black, is that who you're referring to?
Mm-hmm.
The charges were not pedophilia?
I understand that.
She was not underage.
She was at the time.
No, she was not, sir.
Anyway, let's just get back on the clock, okay? This is your letter to your chief asking again for him to account for the officer's actions while actually considering the facts of the evidence. I'm thinking you can stop thinking about your next special visitor long enough to ask the chief to actually respond this time. Now, on a separate topic, you know the weather is getting warmer and it's time to think about camping. Now, I know you don't like to answer my questions, but I'd appreciate an opinion. Normally, I'd be thinking about heading to the mountains. But do you think this time I should decide to go to the beach? Thank you.
Just a quick question. He said that the mayor is responsible for the corporate culture, but then he referenced activities that were taking place at the school district. Just to clarify, the city has no authority over the school district. That is a completely separate elected body.
That is correct. It is a separate governmental entity.
All right, thank you. Wanlan Shao, Bruce Shore, Adam Pine. Dr. Shao.
Yes. Good evening. Mine's not as exciting. I'm a small business owner and dentist here in Livermore since 2009. I made the move to purchase a building to house my growing practice last year. I moved into my new space in January of this year. In March, I had the exterior of my building painted, as it had not been painted since 2005, and it was really old and worn. I also wanted it to be warm and welcoming color for my patients. Prior to painting my building, I checked the Livermore Development Code to make sure I did not need a permit to paint. Also, my contractor, who had been in business in Livermore for the past 31 years, assured me I did not need a permit to paint, the exterior of a building as they had never had to get a permit in their 31 years of operating in Livermore. A couple weeks after painting, I received a letter from the planning department citing me for painting the building without permission. I was told via telephone I needed a permit to paint. After pointing out this Livermore Development Code, where it specifically states I do not need a permit to paint, the city staff changed the reason of the citation. I was then told I needed to match the surrounding natural and built environment. There's a very similar color building, two-toned, across the street from me, less than 100 yards away. I was told that that building was residential and the city of Livermore cannot regulate every homeowner, but they can regulate every commercial property. I find this very presumptuous and called him on it. He then retracted that reasoning and came up with another. His third reason was that the building had a site development plan from 2005, where the previous owner did structural changes and had a color board. And the city staff informed me that I had to keep the same colors as from 2005 or submit a site development plan review. The planning department then passed along my case to the neighborhood preservation department, and I was given until May 1st, 2017 to comply or be fined up to $500 a day. They insisted I need to either repaint my building to its original colors or submit a review. I have asked city staff in multiple emails to cite the specific ordinances which states city authorization is required to paint the building. Every ordinance cited only contains language regarding new construction or expansion of an existing building, neither of which apply to me. The deadline is approaching, and I have yet to receive the exact language specifying city authorization is required to paint the building. I am not sure if this is a discrimination against the color of my building or a need for Livermore to wield a stick, but it is harassment. My life is exciting enough with providing care to my patients, employing multiple employees, and running a small business. I do not need to be harassed by city employees who cannot provide the exact language necessary to support their requirement. And I understand that the week of April 30th to May 6th is Small Business Week, but right now, it sucks to be a small business in Livermore. And I would implore the council to intervene on this matter because I do not want to be persecuted due to the unsubstantiated citation from a city department. Thank you.
Dr. Shao, thank you very much. This is Paul Spence, our Community Development Director. So if you could contact him, he'll give you his contact information. And
thank you so
he
much.
can work with you. Thank you very much. Bruce Shore, Adam Pine, and Steve Simone.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, last Saturday was widely celebrated as Earth Day, a day to recognize how important it is for us to take care of the world in which we live. This year, those acknowledgments were supplemented by calls for attention to the importance of science to our well-being, to our health and our economic welfare. On the football field at Livermore High School, we participants heard some really well-constructed speeches from 6 leaders. Our mayor reminded us of the long-standing community connection we have to science research through our 2 national labs. Our own Livermorium gives us considerable distinction. Each of the other speakers gave us new insights into the importance of science. We were reminded of how science works. We were given testimony of science as a career and how science is important in our local wine industry. We were reminded of some of the great changes to our basic understanding of life and the working of our universe. We could see that it is not just professional scientists to whom science matters, but to all of us. I want to express my own appreciation to all of those who helped organize this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. That really was an amazing event, the March for Science. That was a lot of folks there, very exciting. Adam Pine, Steve Simone, Bruce Nielsen. Mr. Pine. See you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Adam Pine. I'm the director of the medical cannabis collective, The Floral Element, Inc. I wanted to take a few minutes to fill the council in on the medical cannabis climate as of late and the actions the Floral Element is taking to remain compliant in the spirit of the law. In the past few years, the Floral Element and I have worked tirelessly to create the most positive access point for medical cannabis in the Tri-Valley. We have stayed true to the original guidelines of the Compassionate Use Act, as well as the Medical Marijuana Program Act, and even instituted some regulations on ourselves, such as testing all products for cleanliness and potency in order to perpetuate a full disclosure relationship with patients, a relationship built on quality, trust, and transparency. In the past few months, Alameda County and Livermore both have discussed medical cannabis ordinances, the former moving swiftly to its first reading in front of supervisors tomorrow afternoon. As the county has discussed putting 2 larger dispensaries in a similar location to where Livermore has tentatively proposed her own, we feel the need and/or success of a smaller boutique dispensary to be questionable. We've always tried to put patients first, but at this point in time, it's important for me to look out for my employees and their families who have sacrificed so much to make the Floral Element what it is today. In short, I can no longer ask them to soldier on towards an increasingly uncertain future of one day being locally permitted in this area we all grew up in and love. In light of this and the impending dual licensing regulatory requirements coming in 2018, we will begin to dissolve our aging collective structure and delivery model to join forces with our friends HTP Group, a locally permitted and state-favored storefront dispensary in Vallejo. This is an effort to remain consistent with our goal of always operating in the spirit of the law and in compliance with local and state laws. Unfortunately, this may create a void in the accessibility of quality products and top-tier customer service that patients of Livermore have come to expect. For this, we are deeply remorseful. This move represents a chance for our employees to have the longevity and consistency in their careers they deserve, as well as a chance to adequately plan for their futures in an uncertain world. Secondly, this will allow us to do what we love from a much more legitimate standpoint while gaining a deeper understanding of the medical cannabis craft. It's been an interesting and educational journey, and I want to thank the city for being the most progressive in the Tri-Valley, and I really mean that. We still offer our service and perspective to the city should she ever need it. Having the chance to serve local patients through a legitimate dispensary in the city remains one of our top goals for staff and I, even if this is something that we shall have to pursue from alternate means. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pine. Steve Simone, Bruce Nielsen, Dwayne, and Elena. Mr. Simone.
Steve Simone, 609 Everglades. I'm here to talk about the water treatment, the recycled water program, and hopefully we can get that back going. As I don't know where we are as a drought, but conservation is definitely a big concern. And I'm one of the guys that had a water tank in the back of my truck and took advantage of the program, kept my yard green and the neighborhood, my next door neighbor's yard green during that program. And I'm hoping that we can reactivate that program. And I was at the water treatment plant today asking about it, and they haven't heard anything. So I'm here tonight to get on the radar and see if we can't get that going. And Bob, I want to congratulate you on the, clicked on the link that put me to the Channel 2 News, to your accomplishment, and I commend you on what you've done, and you're an inspiration for others, and thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Mr. Simone, Darren Greenwood is in the back, and he can give you some more information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is that Dwayne Ellery and Elena Habinger? I massacred your names, and I apologize.
Hello, I am Dwayne Ely, and this is Elena Habiger. We are in 4-H this year, and we are in 4-H State Exchange. We're going to be going to Massachusetts for a week and stay with the 4-H family there. And then next year, they're going to come with us for a week.
There are about 10 of us going, and in order to go, we need to earn the money. So we're going to have a parking lot May 6th and 7th for the wine festival at $10 each. The parking lot is between 2nd and 3rd Street on Church Street near the Livermore High School.
Okay, so where again is the parking? It's on between 2nd and 3rd Street.
On Church Street.
On Church Street.
Near the high school.
And you're going to be having a parking lot there to raise funds during the downtown Wine Festival. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and this is to raise money for the 4-H exchange. So people are going downtown to to enjoy the festival. Go down and park between 2nd and 3rd Street on Church and support the 4-H exchange.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Well, very good. You got the word out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a website where they can get more information on this, or just pay attention?
Just pay attention.
Okay. So between 2nd and 3rd Street on Church Street by the Livermore High School, that's the place to park for the downtown festival. And what's the date on the festival again? No, what's the date on that? May 5th and 6th?
May 6th and 7th.
May 6th and 7th. So May 6th and 7th, go down to Church Street between 2nd and 3rd and support a great cause. Thank you. And last speaker, John Stein.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. First, I've been watching this council now for 30-some-odd years, and overall, the moral and intellectual transparency of this council is far and above that of most of the, in fact, the overwhelming majority of other city councils. I've been to other city councils and other governmental agencies. No agency is perfect, but this one is very good. And the other thing is, up until now, the sort of the rationale for regulating commercial building colors has been advertising. If the colors are used to advertise, there is some limitation, but otherwise there has not been historically any limitation. People get very creative on paint jobs. The reason I came up, though, was to talk about the downtown committee. At the last meeting, the city, the mayor and the council expressed confidence that they represent the overwhelming majority of the residents of Livermore. Actually, they're heavily biased toward business and the arts. There's what's called conformational bias. When you belong to a social group, you have a tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms your own previous beliefs. And it's self-reinforcing. So I would urge that you and the members of the council not only talk to the members of your groups, which are interlocking and fairly small, but talk to strangers. Go out into the south and north neighborhoods of the city and just knock on doors. Go to homeowners associations, religious groups, outside of your normal group, and ask them what they like and don't like about the downtown, what they would like to see in the downtown, what they would not like to see in the downtown. And that way is probably the best way to get a global view of the feelings of the community. I mean, go out as far as Springtown and South Livermore and talk to people. There's also the other thing that I think has not been discussed, and that's the opportunity cost. The city has a number of expenses that are coming up in terms of unfunded pension liabilities and unfunded deferred maintenance. And there's the opportunity cost. If you spend a great deal of money in the downtown, that's less money to spend in other areas, whether it's police, fire, library, road paving. So I would suggest that at some point, the city begin looking at a bond measure if they're going to have any substantial costs for the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Okay, that's the end of the Citizens Forum.
I was wondering, could I?
Oh.
I've got a question.
Yes.
I mean, can I make a comment? Or
Sure.
I just would want to point out on the downtown committee, its purpose is outreach, and it's how to go and meet all these people. It is not to be an insular committee in itself making decisions.
Okay, Bruce Nielsen, right? Okay. I called your name there, and we just kind of jumped. They just jumped up. Okay. Mr. Nielsen.
Good evening. I'd like to address the council, and I'd like to echo Mr. Simone's interest in the recycled water program. Just to put some numbers into it, I was probably using 4,000 gallons a month over the course of a 5 to 6 month season. Obviously, that's saving 20,000 gallons a year, and there were probably 150 to 200 participants. So, I mean, certainly in time of drought, that's probably significant. The governor says even though it's raining, we should probably continue to conserve. I hope that Livermore continues the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. And you noticed Darren Greenwood?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thanks. He's got to talk with. He coordinates all those activities. Okay, sorry we skipped over you there. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. These are typically routine items acted upon with a single action. If there's anyone that wishes to speak on any of the consent items, okay, we have a couple of these. Is there anyone from the council that would like to pull an item for discussion?
Oh, I think 410 might be worth just summarizing for the audience.
Okay. 410.
So, and I would ask the city manager to just, give a summary of it.
Okay. And I do have, let's see, 4.04, 4.06, and 4.10. So let's go ahead and, do I have a motion for 4.012, 4.01, 02, 03, 05, 7, 8, and 9?
I so move.
Okay, so moved. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded? Okay, so is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition, abstentions? Okay, so moving on to 4.04, I have a speaker card. We have Susan Junk. This is 4.04, the services agreement for certain city-owned properties in the downtown.
Yeah, I'm Susan Junk. I live in Livermore, and I'd like to encourage the city council by directing the management company and staff to preserve another of Livermore's older buildings, namely 141 North Livermore Avenue. I believe it's a two-story brick stucco building. Ann Holman refers to it on page 65 of her A to Z book as being built with Alexander Essen's bricks, and over the years was a saloon, apartments, and tattoo parlor. It's also highlighted in her book as one of the two remaining structures called the brick block. The other one is 2160 Railroad Avenue, which is used to be Charlotte's Web. Basically, because of its age and character, and which for me, history is on the top of my quality of life list. To direct staff in the management company to preserve it as and don't let it be neglected as far as upkeep and maintenance. Thank you.
I guess a question for city staff. Do you know if 141 North Livermore and I think 2160 Railroad Avenue, are those the addresses?
Yeah.
Do you know if those are in private ownership or if those are...
141 North Livermore is owned by the city, and we
141.
are...
Is that the
Echo
housing authority?
Yes.
Okay.
Not housing authority.
Not the authority, but the...
Housing Counseling Center.
That's right.
Yes.
Tri-Valley Housing Opportunity Center.
Yes.
Just took me a moment to get
Yes,
there.
that's what it used to be there.
Okay. Tri-Valley
it's
Housing
there.
Opportunity Center. Okay.
No plans to
and
get rid of it.
2160 Railroad?
That is not ours.
Okay.
The old, or the Charlotte's Web building is not owned by the city.
Okay. But there's already a proposal to, I think there's somebody that's proposing to move in there.
We did have a project that went through Planning Commission for a deli and a restaurant that was going to open there.
Baker store. Okay,
Right.
yeah. Well, that one looks like it's in pretty good shape, and we'll see about 141 North Livermore. Okay, thank you for bringing those to our attention. And Sherry Sheets, this is 4.06. This is for Jim Vingo and the naming of the the trail dedication.
Hello, my name is Sherry Sheets. I'm your city engineer, and this is regarding the tribute to Jim Vingo for naming a segment of the trail after him. I've had the pleasure to serve with Jimmy Vingo for over a decade. Jimmy was an avid outdoorsman who loved to hike, bike, and fish. He organized and led several trips to the wilderness, and we all benefited from his knowledge and great skills as a backpacker and fisherman. Jimmy was an extraordinary engineer whose insatiable curiosity was forever propelling the city forward in terms of innovative technologies. He designed and implemented several miles of trails. He established many new methods of repair, including chip seal, cape seal, microsurfacing, etc., that made the program, the pavement management program, more cost-effective and longer lasting. He even helped the Federal Aviation Administration figure out how to modify their criteria for acceptance so that their new polymer additive pavement surfacing could be practically implemented. Jimmy was more than an extraordinary engineer. He was also an extraordinary human being. He was always open to new ideas, and he was incredibly astute at analyzing situations. He treated all folks with respect and dignity. Jimmy faced an incredible physical challenge with the Joseph Machado disease. He did so with grace and determination. When it robbed him of his balance to walk, Jimmy bought a recumbent bike. He was determined to remain physically fit. He never complained about his situation, and he never failed to continue to have empathy for others. Jimmy was an inspiration and a motivational factor for all of us, his colleagues. Jimmy truly is deserving of this tribute, naming a trail segment near his home in Springtown after him. May Jimmy be happily hiking in heaven, experiencing wonders that we mere mortals have no way of understanding.
And the thing about Jim is he always had the greatest attitude. I'd run into him in the parking lot. He always had a great big smile on his face because he loved what he was doing here. He loved the people that he worked with, and he loved what he was doing. And I think that's what kept him going. And so this is an honor and privilege to name that segment after Jim. So thanks for whoever came up with the idea. I think it's terrific. So thank you. On to 4.10. Gene King.
Hi, good evening, Council and Mayor and staff. I am Jean King, and I'm here to talk about the 410, and that's where you are approving for PlaceWorks to be the facilitator for the steering committee. And so I had looked at their process of what they were going to be doing. And of course, PlaceWorks, or not PlaceWorks, but David Early worked on the general plan when we did the general plan for the city, but he did not work on the downtown. And I was a little bit disappointed in his application because he didn't mention working on the downtown a lot. So I'm hoping he's going to bring in some other people, or there are going to be some other consultants which are maybe a little bit more expert on downtown to work out what could be for that. And so the other part was that there is now a new on the website or on our information about how he is going to do the outreach to the community, and it looks really very comprehensive. And so I think for these people who are concerned that just the steering committee is going to be doing it, it's making the decisions, it's not true. He has a big plan for going out to the community in all sorts of different ways. The things that I was wondering about, though, is I hope there is going to be a plan not just for how we reach for the community, but what we're reaching out to the community with. What is going to be the process for deciding what kind of materials are going to go out to the community? So I hope there will be a good process defined for the materials that are going out to the community. And then the other thing is, we want to encourage, I think, people to come to the steering committee meetings too, because they'll see what the process is like. And so I'm hoping that on the agenda, because I know we have to follow the rules very carefully, and you can't talk about anything unless it's on the agenda. And so I hope that the agenda will be broad enough so that if somebody can make it to some meeting, that they can talk about all the different projects, all the different parts of the project, so that if they can't make a certain meeting sometime, if they come to the other, but they have a comment they want to make, they can do it, so that the agendas will be broad enough so that people can speak from the public about the different things on the agenda. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that there was a lot of work in that about some of the tools they're going to be using, polling and workshops and hands-on and out into the community and the farmers markets and the like. Mr. Spence, would you like to speak to that about the experience in the downtown?
Sure. David Early and his team, Placeworks, have extensive experience across the state and across the Bay Area. They are a Bay Area firm. They have significant downtown work. They are expert in land use planning and also in facilitation. We had 3 submittals, and the committee judged that they were by far the most comprehensive in terms of their application submittal. If they're approved tonight, they're ready to begin work on the 27th. As was mentioned, they have extensive experience in Livermore. They've worked on our visioning project that led into our general plan, which was happening about the same time as our downtown specific plan. They've also worked on our design standards and guidelines, housing element, and other projects. So they've got great knowledge about downtowns, about land use and facilitation, and also about Livermore.
And I think that well, of course, we got a couple of the committee members. Well, yeah, all the committee members here. Very important. How do you craft that so that you do get that broad-based community input? And I think the polling is going to be an important part of that. The workshops, the farmers market, all of those things, tapping into all aspects. And I certainly appreciate the comment about going outside of your normal constituency, as Mr. Stein pointed out, to get as much input as possible. Dr. Carling.
Yes, I'd just like to mention that it's going to be up to the committee to help us all, collectively, all 19 of us, to decide those folks that we want to bring in to speak to us. If we don't think that a particular person provides the right expertise, it's up to the committee to figure out who those right people are to bring them in. And again, it really is up to the committee to determine, what the materials are and how to best reach out to the community. So I think it really is going to be up to the committee to just help all of us decide those points. So I'm looking forward to this Thursday when we get together to decide again. And also, the agenda, as you know, we need to publish the agenda 72 hours in advance. And so I think one of the things that I would hope that the committee would be looking at on this Thursday is whether or not the agenda meets the needs moving forward. I understand Ms. King's point about having it broad enough to get the public to be able to comment. So if we don't meet that need this Thursday, then we can figure out how we can do it for the next meeting to make sure that we do ensure that we get as broad a participation as possible. And I certainly encourage, all of us to invite people to the meetings, because again, that's another way to provide outreach, as Mr. Stein has pointed out to all of us.
I'd like to say,
Councilmember Warner?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is I think it's worth making a distinction between expertise on how to facilitate a meeting versus expertise on how to design a downtown. So I just want to second Councilmember Carling's comment that in addition to the facilitation expertise, we have at our ability to bring in experts as required in order to, improve our materials, if that's what we want to do. So there was no intent ever to get the two in one, because one thing I would suggest, you don't want the facilitator to have a point of view. I mean, you're trying to do your best to facilitate the group towards a place, not necessarily where the facilitator wants to go. So it's something to, it's important to make that distinction. The other thing is that I think there's a balance that has to be made here. If you had a broad agenda where all topics all the time, it's very difficult to focus and get anywhere. So I think the request was, how do we make sure that if somebody's out of town, that they can have a chance to comment on something that's off topic for that meeting, possibly, right? So I think we'll have to think about that, but I think there's a proper balance to be struck between just, all topics all the time and focus, because we've got a lot to cover, and we need to be efficient about it.
And just a little refinement there. As I recall, we're not having somebody come in to design a downtown. The community of Livermore is designing the downtown. It's what they want in the downtown. That's what we're striving for, is to get the people to provide the input to make sure that we get what the community wants.
Right, and how do we, I mean, what we have to do is put materials out there that present a sufficient range of choices with the pros and cons so that the community can make the right decision.
Right. With the financial component considered as well, and that's the other two guys. Okay, with that, I need a motion for the consent calendar 4.04, 4.06, the trail dedication, and 4.10.
So move.
Moved by Councilmember
Second.
Warner, seconded by Councilmember Carling. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It passes unanimously. 5.01, the 2017 Fire Hazard Abatement Program. Didn't we do this like 6 months ago? It just seems like it comes up.
Certainly seems that way.
Months. Yeah, it's amazing. At times, just screaming by.
Absolutely. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Ryan Rucker, Fire Marshal for the Livermore Pleasanton Fire Department. On March 13th, 2017, the City Council adopted Resolution 2017-027, declaring existing conditions of growing weeds on private property, streets, parkways, and sidewalks adjacent to each parcel of real property are a public nuisance and should be abated. Parcel owners have been advised to abate weeds and debris which constitute fire hazards. Abatement standards have been mailed to owners or posted conspicuously on their property in cases where a mailing address was insufficient. Property owners can avoid enforcement by the city by completing abatement work in accordance with guidelines or protest the need to abate hazards at this public hearing. Staff recommends that the City Council consider any and all protests, and if Council finds it appropriate, adopt a resolution overruling protests and direct staff to proceed with necessary weed abatement of all parcels requiring abatement. Staff's available for questions.
Any questions? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. I have a card from Alan Burnham. Mr. Burnham?
Yes, the only thing I'm here to protest about is the use of the term weeds. One person's weed is another person's flower. I think we have to distinguish between fire hazard and weed. That actually is quite a different problem. If you have thistles, that's a weed, which is a pest problem. It's different from a fire problem. But I also I read through the property list, and there's quite a few of those that are out on the edge of town, which are really rural properties, and the city wants all those taken care of. I don't have any objection to that. But I do notice, having walked here from Findlay Way over here, that the city of Livermore and LARPD should be on this list, because I walked by lots of fire hazards over by the skate park. So I think you need to be, don't be hypocritical, please.
Okay, I think the main issue is not necessarily what it is, whether it's weeds, thistles, or flowers. It's the concern is the fire hazard. But Mr. Rucker, as far as the skate park?
Well, the city lots are going to be in compliance as well as the private lots as well. It's not something that we ignore.
But we know it's there, and we know to clean it up.
We're aware of it.
And we generally use city crews to deal with city property, so they don't go through the private abatement process. But by the deadline, they'll ultimately all be mowed as well. The things that used to be golf courses, for example, things that are around the skate park, all of those will ultimately follow the same standards.
Okay, all right, very good. This is the last card, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Vice Mayor Spadovsky.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Carling. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It passes unanimously. Matters for discussion. Mill Square Park, Livermorium Plaza. Exciting stuff. Livermore, one of only 6 cities in the world that has that distinction of having an element named after it. I never tire of saying that.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'd like to introduce David Meyer to my left of Meyer and Silberberg. They're the landscape architect for the project. Before he walks you through the conceptual plan, I'd like to say a few words about where we are in the process. So it should be noted that the city held 2 public workshops to get input on the proposed design of the park. The second public workshop was a joint meeting of the Planning Commission, the Commission for the Arts, and the Beautification Committee. So there was a lot of input given at that meeting. And that was followed up with a presentation to the City Council of a preliminary design. So the council had a chance to weigh in on an earlier version of this project. Excuse me. That was back in 2014, and at that time, the project was put on pause to work out a remediation plan for the site. There used to be a gas station at that corner, which is at the southeast corner of Livermore Avenue and First Streets, and the result was contamination in the soil. There's lead and hydrocarbons in there, so we'll have to clean up the site before we actually start construction on the plaza. So the city is close to coming up with a final plan for the remediation, and it should be coming to council shortly for your approval. And the plan is to clean up the site while concurrently refining the design and preparing design drawings for the park. So at the meeting where a preliminary plan was presented to the council requested that staff check in with council before proceeding with the normal design review process. So that's why we're here tonight, to have the council take another look at the revised concept plan and alternative plan for the park. And given council's direction, staff will proceed with the normal design review process, which involves review and a recommendation by the Beautification Committee and the Planning Commission. And finally, it'll return to council for final approval of the park design. So with that, I'll hand it over to David, and he'll walk you through the concept plan.
Thank you, Scott. And good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. And staff, good evening. It's been over 2 years since I last saw you and presented to the community. So just want to say that I'm glad that this project is still alive, and I'm excited to be here, and would like to take you through what we have developed since we last met. And I'll just give you a little bit of a description. As you already know, the intersection of Livermore Avenue and First Street has pretty unique conditions, where parks and plazas frame the intersection rather than buildings. And Livermore Plaza is unlike the other adjacent parks, which are open. Livermorian Plaza has limited access, and while it is pleasant, it is less open and substantially more concealed by plantings. And along the back edge of the plaza, the mounted landscape creates places of darkness and a refuge for undesirable activities, particularly at night. When lighting is poor, it makes one feel uncomfortable, and it doesn't invite people into the plaza. It's a condition that we've been asked to correct. So it's our opinion that the plaza needs to have high visibility, be open, and feel welcome, as well as safe. The city also had an arborist assess all the trees on site, and the majority of them weren't deemed healthy. The need to remediate the site soils left over from the gas station required that the existing trees be removed, including the holiday spruce. If council is interested in keeping some sort of holiday tree in the plaza, it's possible to bring in a temporary tree on an annual basis, or possibly plant a permanent tree somewhere in the back corner. But that may require some redesign to what I'm presenting tonight. It's also possible to locate a temporary or permanent holiday tree at Shea Plaza in front of the Bankhead Theater. So I'd like to go on to our current proposal. We were asked to develop a plaza scheme that would best suit the urban design goals of downtown Livermore. a place for community gatherings that was slightly more urban and different from the adjacent corner parks. And here's our current proposal. The design is focused around a large shade tree which anchors the heart of the plaza, which is right here. And beneath that tree, we're proposing a timeline that will tell the story of the discovery of Livermorium, element 116. And I'll come back to that in a few minutes. I think it's a pretty cool component of our design that is new since we last met. It is something that we believe will educate young and old alike. And then framing this central tree and timeline, there are 3 arc benches that will create a distinct space within the plaza without closing off views or the adjacent sidewalks. The design embraces the activity outside of Pete's, as well as allowing room for movable seating to spill into the plaza. And to soften the plaza, a flowering tree grove with understory plantings provides a backdrop of color and texture, which you see back here. The openness of the design allows for flexibility of program within the plaza, creating a space for both large celebrations as well as intimate gatherings for coffee breaks and lunch breaks for small groups to gather. Beneath the tree, we're proposing to do a timeline that becomes the centerpiece of the plaza. The story of Livermorium discovery is overlaid onto the electron shell of element 116, represented by 116 medallions that would be laid into the paving. Beginning on opposite sides of the electron shell, the timeline describes the independent beginnings of the 2 laboratories on opposite sides of the world, one in Russia and one here, of course, in Livermore, and how these 2 storylines come together in partnership to discover element 116, Livermorium. I'm going to sorry, having a little, okay. This is one of our studies that looked at utilizing 116 bronze plates. 20 would be cast with text for timeline events. 96 other simple plaques could be used for donor opportunities with bronze banding that ties them all together. Cool. This is a separate study which looks at using 116 LED lights. 20 white lights at timeline events would represent the white limelight glow of calcium, and then 96 red lights represent the red radioactive glow of curium, with stainless steel banding that ties them all together. And the third option is a combination of both of those studies, 116 bronze plates with 116 embedded LED lights. While this might be our preferred option, this would surely need to be tested with the cost estimating to see which of these schemes would best suit the budget. And this is a perspective looking from the corner intersection, looking back at the specimen tree that would be imported, and then this is the narrative timeline that would be oops. Okay, and that is the timeline at the base of the tree. And then at the back of the grove of the plaza is the flowering grove of trees that frames the plaza with the seating on all edges. And just briefly, just to take you through kind of the materials, we're looking at various types of trees that we could find of a large specimen so that it would immediately provide shade for the plaza. The understory flowering trees that would frame the backside. We were looking at crepe myrtle. We envision movable tables and chairs that would be anchored near the proximity of the restaurant Pete's. And then these are reference images for the the seat walls that would frame the plaza, being wide enough for people to sit down on, perhaps even spread a blanket and have a picnic on. In terms of the ground plane, we envision the plaza the current plaza being represented with decorative concrete paving that would extend all the way out to the street curb. And then the timeline would have some sort of stone paving that would be suitable for embedding the markers directly into the paving to tell the story. We're keen on illuminating the park, and we envision that we'll light up the brick wall along Pete's to create a more dramatic backdrop to the plaza, to enliven the plaza and make it safe. And adding to that would be ambient lighting that would uplight the trees, and then additional lighting as required to provide the foot candles for safety. We would possibly incorporate some more of the street lighting and bring that into the plaza. And to give you a sense of scale, depending upon the density of the events, the plaza has the potential to hold up to 950 people. And while the Livermore timeline could be considered as art for the plaza, if council wishes additional art, we have identified a couple locations where art might be incorporated. One at the corner that greets you into the plaza, and perhaps another opportunity along the parking lot at the other side of the plaza. This is a perspective looking out from Pete's. We have dropped in a potential location, just symbolizing I'm sorry, pushing the wrong buttons here. There we go. At this corner would be the possibility for one location for additional art, perhaps the back edge that could anchor the back side of the plaza on that side. And this is an alternative that would place art at the center of the plaza. In this proposal, we would lose our central specimen shade tree, so we would incorporate different types of plantings if we were to go to this scheme, particularly the plantings around the perimeter. We would change the typology of the trees around here from understory flowering trees to overstory shade trees. And this is a perspective of that option. With this option, we would you can see to the left, we would also bring in some additional plantings. So the plaza becomes a little bit more enclosed in with this consideration, but it's just an option that we've been asked to look at. And again, this is not proposed art, this is just a placeholder for what we might incorporate at a later date. So with that, I thank you and would be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions at this point? Councilmember Coomber?
I don't know if it's too early for comments, but I roll down to First Street a lot when it's 105 degrees outside because that's just what I do. I'm 2 miles down from my house and do this. And when I look forward to coming getting a sandwich, a cup of coffee, and sitting under the trees that are currently down there now, I'm not. The ground's awfully warm for 6 months out of the year there for families to get out and run around in bare feet and do anything. Certainly they can go across the street to the fountains and do that there. But I'm a big fan of the trees that already exist. And although I really was looking forward to seeing an arborist report in here from a genuine arborist to find out what the true condition of those trees are and what's salvageable. I'd love to salvage the big Christmas tree there. There's just a lot, and it's not so much history and nostalgia, but I said, this is what I do, and there's several of us dummies who get out there when it's over 100 degrees and want to come downtown and sit beneath the shade and in the breeze. It's a very good way to relax, and maybe they saw me down there and think I'm one of the undesirables. I don't know. Who knows what it is, you know? That happens from time to time. But I do really, I'm dismayed by the amount of open space and knowing that concrete there is going to be in the sun in the middle of July and August, and there are going to be people wandering around. We want to bring people down there. on any given weekend this time of year, you can find many people who are at Pete's who migrate over to that side. And like I say this as a regular downtown goer, not mostly anecdotal here, but just what I see when I pass by. I'm not sure that a plan to remove those trees until we truly know how stressed they are. If they're not salvageable, I'm all on board. But if they are, I think they provide an incredible amount of relief to people who have been idiots and gone out when it's 105 and rolled downtown to get iced coffee and a sandwich. But yeah, my 2 cents.
Okay. I could tell you that the arborist did assess the trees, and we can make that report available to you. And then there's...
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
So I just want to draw a distinction. The trees on the perimeter are not what we're talking about removing, right?
Not the street trees.
Right. So the the ones that are right outside of Pete's where people sit under now, we're not talking about coming out here, but it's those.
Back in the back. That's what I'm thinking. Right. That's where I usually hang out, is on top of the grass.
Oh, okay. But anyway, I've got a few thoughts on this.
Questions at this point?
Not questions, but I got thoughts on the design after the public comment.
Yeah, because you have questions now, and then we can handle those, and then we can go to general council comments. Okay, this is matters for consideration. I do have 2 speaker cards, John Stein and Nancy Bankhead. Mr. Stein.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. Mill Square Park was established in 1976. I was there. It was partly the bicentennial. It was partly the straightening of the street, and it was also in memory of Calvin J. Stevens, who owned the mill that was there in the 1800s. He came in 1852. But the trees were planted that year, both at Mill Square and Lizzie Fountain. They quietly grew. They survived the clear cutting of the Modesto ash in the downtown. They survived the replacement of the camphor trees that replaced the Modesto ash with Chinese pistache. So for the past 40-some-odd years, they've been quietly converting carbon dioxide and water to wood. It will take another 40 years to get that level of shade again. At least 5 of the trees are protected because they're more than 60 inches in circumference at breast level. They were stressed by the drought like trees all over the place, but they seem to have recovered fairly well, particularly the liquid ambers, the tulip poplar, and all except for one of the redwoods. I like it there. It's cool in the summer. It's tranquil. It's an island of tranquility in a bustling downtown. Somebody said you could tell when you're in a big city when there's no grass or the only grass you can see comes with a keep off sign. This is one of the few pieces of grass downtown, and it's the largest trees downtown. And I would urge protecting them. Arbor Day is next weekend, and I would urge looking carefully at protecting the trees. If this were a bare lot, I think the proposal is a good proposal. But a couple of things. Birch trees don't survive in Livermore. I'm not sure whether it's the alkalinity of the soil, the low humidity, but it doesn't matter what kind. River birch, white birch, paperbark birch, they last about 3 or 4 years and die, so that's a poor choice. And now it looks like oaks are becoming a poor choice. If you look on the west side of town, the oaks are dying. The blue oaks, the valley oaks, they're all turning brown and dying. I don't know whether it's sudden oak death or something, but it's killing them. So oaks may not be a good choice. Perhaps we could rescue one of the liquid ambers if you wanted a tree in the center, or a ginkgo or something that will survive downtown. But I think, the fact that it does need more lighting. In general, it's in good shape, though. I mean, the trees seem in good shape. One other thing is the art piece. I'm sort of enamored of the 37-inch cyclotron magnet in front of Lawrence Livermore Lab, and Lawrence Livermore Hall of Science, rather. And perhaps you could get a part of the accelerator or detection systems that were used in the actual studies and erect that. I'm not sure burying LEDs in the ground is a good idea either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Nancy Bankhead.
Hello, I'm Nancy Bankhead. I've had a few problems the last year on a piece of property, so I've become intimately involved in the history of the wine country in Livermore. And the design where he had a part where you could have art there, why we have nothing downtown that says why we're the other wine country. And it needs to be said, and other things about Livermore need to be said, and this is the last place we can do it. And my idea is to get something with all the history of the wine families, the 1800 families, and you make it a circle, you make it about 6 foot tall, and you have the history of the wine and maybe a map of the different wineries, and it would look great on that corner. It would look absolutely fabulous. You could have other pieces of art there about the lab. We have nothing downtown to say except we have a great downtown, but we need something to say, go outside Livermore and spend some more money. You know, we're all about getting more money into Livermore so we can have beautiful things like this. But to come downtown, if you come downtown Livermore, do you know that we have, how many wineries do we have, Mayor? 50?
62.
Oh, excuse me. 62 wineries in Livermore. And you go downtown, you don't even see it.
5
you don't
breweries
know.
and 3 distilleries.
We do, and so we need all our Livermore history in something that says, "Come to Livermore. We're proud of our history," and I think this spot is great. And I do like our old trees. I'm sorry, but this is a neat spot. If you're going to redo it, let's have some good history in there too. I mean, we have Lizzie Fountain. That's part of our history, but I don't know if everybody really wants to know Lizzie Fountain and our history there, but our wine country, they do. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's the rest of the last of the public comments that we have.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Can staff add just one clarification regarding the trees? I think we all appreciate mature trees, and the health of these trees is basically a secondary reason for the proposed removal. The primary reason is it's necessary for the soil remediation. To get it approved by the county health department, the city will be required to take anywhere between 6 to 7.5 feet of the soil at the site. So that's the main reason why the trees would need to be removed.
So we're going to, I remember something like 1,300 cubic yards or some horrific amount like that is going to be have to taken out of this site because of the lead and hydrocarbon contamination. But 6 feet, so pretty much scrape it down 6 feet on this to abate the soil and lead. Wow. Vice Mayor?
So what's the status of Chevron funding some of the remediation on site? Do we know what's going on with that? I think it was in the staff report that Chevron, I'm trying to, go ahead, I'll just.
Certainly, we've had negotiations on and off for several months and going on years now with Chevron, trying to determine what is a cost due to remediation and how that increases the cost of the particular project. We've basically hit an impasse. We've been working with their engineers and our engineers to find out how to make that determination. What is the incremental cost of the project as a result of the need to remediate? An approval or direction on a particular project will help that conversation so we know what we're dealing with.
Okay, then the other question, I'll flat out ask it. Is it currently is there a need to remediate the site? MTBE, is there a current plume that's moving, or because typically solids, contaminants tend to stay where they're at, to a certain extent. So I'm wondering if there is even a need to disturb the soil to remove it.
Right now, we're with our efforts working with county as far as what the remediation is for this particular location. There are two elements that are involved. The contamination involves hydrocarbons from the gas operation as well as lead. What's requiring the need right now is because if you want to develop that, we need to remediate the soil in order to do something with the property. That to the side, there would still be an ongoing enforcement effort by the county, but it would be on a different timeline.
So
one of the issues there has to do with public contact and the kind of public contact that you would have. In other words, if this were the back of a private business, it would be a much lower priority than someplace where, with the near surface contamination in particular, you have a hypothetical path of contact, and with sensitive receptors, i.e. children or people spending more than just a little bit of the time of day there, you have a potential issue. Obviously, if we were not redeveloping it, it would be a lower priority for county enforcement, but it still is on their list. It is an unabated hazard, and so over the long run, your previous direction to us, council's previous direction, not necessarily these people, because we've been at this a while, was that they ultimately wanted to have the site cleaned. But yes, I mean, the triggering event is our redevelopment of the site, but in the absence of that, we still have contamination on the site and at least a potential path of contact.
Because I didn't know if it was a situation where it's considered capped, because I know that that's an actual remediation effort is you just cap the thing and
it is,
leave it as is.
And usually, however, you do want a solid material, though. You do want a pavement to do capping. We've done that in other locations in the city. We put a street over that in an industrial area, but a very different situation than in the center of your downtown with actually open grass.
Gotcha. Okay, and then the other question is, in the staff report, it said that it was a cost estimated of $1.2 million for this project, and it references that we have funding in the CIP. Looking at the CIP, there is a participation by others at $175,000, but the remainder we're about $500,000 short. I don't know if we're talking multiple CIPs. I just downloaded the current version off of our website to double check to make sure I didn't have an old version. And there's one CIP listed with a total of $900,000, and like I said, $175,000 is from a yet to be determined source, but the other two are general fund and other capital improvement projects. So where's the $500K coming from? And Sherry's got it in her back pocket.
I wish. The new CIP that you'll be getting here in May is adjusted to reflect the fact that there's about another $500,000 worth of remediation costs. It is our intent to seek reimbursement from Chevron. However, we don't know. Extent of that is,
Okay, because I'm just becoming increasingly concerned about the cost. I agree with what we're trying to do. I agree that the grass is nice and the trees are nice, but if it's contaminated and we need to take care of it, I can see that. But now that we're, past the million mark, I start getting a little nervous. So,
of course, one of the moving pieces here is that we've been trying to get Chevron to remediate the site. And Chevron wants to know how deep we're going to go. We don't know how deep we're going to go until we know what the site's going to look like. We don't know what the site's going to look like until we know what the cost is. So you get this sort of circular issue. But we're going to be going, or the city's going to be pursuing reimbursement from Chevron. That's something we've been talking about for a couple of years now.
That is correct. Absent our ability to negotiate an acceptable settlement between the city and Chevron, the city will be positioned to pursue a recovery through the CERCLA Act, which is the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. But in order to do that, you have to expend the funds first.
Any other questions? Going to, Councilmember Warner?
Yeah, I had.
I was
trying to jump the gun earlier.
Okay, go for it.
So a couple of things here. One is, it was pointed out, it's been on the, on the radar for a few years, and it's kind of like, well, why don't we try and decide, should we get to the point where we do want to do something, what would it look like? So the main purpose of tonight was, what about the designs and kind of informing that? And then, of course, depending on what the preference is for the design, then you get into the cost and you go through that. But we can go in endless circles if you start worrying about it. So at some point, you just got to get going on something and start making some decisions. So I think the main purpose of tonight was to give feedback on the design, if I'm not mistaken. So I've got a few thoughts with respect to that. So from the discussion so far, we've talked about, well, you have to go down so many feet, and that means all the trees go or not. So are we clear that the ones on the periphery don't have to go?
That's correct. So all the street trees will remain.
Okay, but now we're talking about the others.
Right.
And then there's some questions about their viability. And then the other thing is, though, that it's, if you look at the other parts of the intersection, this one is not particularly inviting, except during the day when you're trying to get out of the sun, perhaps. But the other parts at night, I personally find it not so inviting. And I go through there and I go to the bankhead and stuff like that, and it's not totally comfortable. So I understand that point of view. I second the comments that it's a lot of concrete, and there isn't some shade over some of that concrete, and it's going to get kind of hot. So I'm not sure that I would go with that much exposed concrete without shade on top of it. So I think shade's very important, and I think you can get that shade. I've grown a few trees, but it's possible. Now, I also looked at the design there, and again, one of the earlier comments I had from the previous design, really don't want to see that parking lot, and then you've got a clear thing through it. So my request again is, I don't want to see it if we can avoid it. So at least vines on that. And if that was the intent, then show it that way. But having a straight shot looking at car headlights is not particularly good as far as I'm concerned. Then on some of the materials slide you had there, you showed the grass on the inside of the curve with a couple of people sitting on the outside. But in the designs, you show that the inside is what would be used by people, not the outside of the curve, right?
I think the second alternate that we showed that had the art in the center, we had additional planting on the outside with the shade trees.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the intent is, if you're going to have these concrete structures, that people are sitting on the inside, not on the outside.
On that latter scheme, yes. On the first scheme, people could sit in both directions.
In both, but in your materials slide, you showed grass on the inside.
Yes, and that was a reference image, just to kind of
right. That's what I'm saying. So that's not the intent. Is people will always be able to sit on the inside.
Yes.
So I would say that more shade and more of the tables would be good. And I would hope that there's some way not to have so much concrete. I mean, because that's going to get hot. Then, with respect to the, I kind of like the thought of both the lights and the brass plates. I mean, as a way to represent that. I got the impression, though, that it's getting kind of complicated, and I'm a scientist-type physicist, so I kind of understand it. But I'm looking at that and saying, I just don't know if that's too complicated. But it was kind of neat from that point of view. But will most people really understand that complexity or get anything out of it? I don't know. So it's just.
You're talking about all the electrons?
Yeah. Pardon?
You're talking about all the electrons?
Yeah, all the electrons. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think this thing had any electrons. Did it? When it was put together, right? I mean, it was a
plus 116.
Yeah. Did it actually have the electrons?
Yeah, they fired the calcium into.
I mean, I was just wondering if it was so energized that
they went into the
completely stripped of all of his electrons.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I think you got to be slamming this stuff together. So I don't know. I'm not that.
Well, it didn't live that long.
It didn't live that long, and I'm not sure it had the electrons, so I'm not sure. But anyway.
But I think the concept.
Maybe it did. I don't know.
I think it was
the concept of the 96 curium and the 20 calcium. That was very cool.
It's like an episode of Big Bang Theory.
Right. But I don't know.
Well, it comes from the calcium and the curium, right?
Yeah, calcium and curium, the calcium 40.
But anyway, the preferences for myself are to be open and inviting, with lots of shade and a lot of opportunity for people to sit and converse. And the thing about over by the flagpole, and you have the restaurant spilling out there, you have the adults being able to sit there and they watch the kids playing in the grass. So if I don't know if the drought precludes any kind of grass, but that didn't strike me as overly kid-friendly, and that would be something that I would want to see. So shade and kid-friendly, and a lot of opportunity for people to sit and converse and inviting.
One of the things that, because when we first talked about this, when we originally named Livermore Plaza, a lot of the public comments that we got were that people wanted something that was interactive, something that was kinetic, something that the kids could work on. And then we had some of the sculptures that were there, and the idea of having a glass sculpture in downtown just gave me, I woke up in a cold sweat, the idea of kids climbing on something like that. But something that's interactive, indestructible, and kinetic, and that was what the original we were hoping for. We didn't get any of those. I mean, I loved all three designs, but there was really lukewarm. We got about a third of the people liked each of them, and there wasn't really a major consensus of any of them. In the last iteration that we got when we did the downtown plan, we heard from a lot of people that we wanted, a water feature. They want water. They like water features. With the drought, it's problematic. But so something kinetic with water and interactive, and what I would hope would be indestructible. And so I was at the Kennedy Space Center 2 years ago, and then I saw one of these in Disneyland, but it is a granite ball fountain, and if you imagine a 2-ton granite ball floating on a film of water, and then the children can play tug of war with this thing because they can push it one way or another. So you got all these kids, and I've seen these before. It's a magnet. All these kids start pulling and pushing on this giant 2-ton ball of granite or marble. And what I was thinking would be really kind of cool is to have that, where you have on attachment 2. You've got the circle, and you've got all the electrons in the orbitals. But to have this large marble or granite ball as the nucleus of Livermore, and then you got all the electrons around it. And I think the electrons are just really cool, and the idea that you've differentiated between the curium and the calcium, I think it's cool. I'm a chemist, So, but I think that's very exciting. It's very creative. I love the timeline, and the fact that it highlights the laboratory relationship. It highlights the fact that Livermore is a city of innovation. It's a city of technology and science. And just coming off of the March for Science on Saturday, I think this is really very exciting, and the fact that you suddenly have this interactive, creative, kinetic thing that invites children, and the fact that it's not a fountain, so it doesn't use a lot of water, because it's just floating on at about a 1/16 of an inch of water, and of course then you got the physics behind it, and it's just, I think it's cool. So, and I broached the subject to the Art Commission, just so that this doesn't come as a complete shock. But something like that, where it really accomplishes what we've heard a lot of people ask for, and yeah, the big shade tree. But we've also talked about these like canvas leaves. There was something similar sort of proposal over the Bankhead Plaza, the Shea Plaza at the Bankhead, and a similar sort of architecture out at the Livermore Plaza. So you do have some of that shade. I really like the design, and I like the idea about making it interactive. I gotta agree with Councilmember Coomber, though. I'm uncomfortable removing the spruce because there's a certain fondness. Now, the spruce did fall down not that long ago. It was about 10 years ago, I guess it fell over. So we propped it back up again. So I'm not sure if it's possible to move Bruce when you move him into the back of it. But I'm uncomfortable about that. But I think the general design of it is very exciting, but recognizing that ultimately we do have to, somewhere along the line, the site has to be remediated, and the farther back we go, the less likely we're going to get reimbursed by Chevron. So I think we need to be able to move ahead with this, get reimbursed for it, but I think this is the general design. I think is very exciting.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Just another comment, because I did not comment on design. I was only focused on the money and the remediation. I do like the theory of the LEDs. I think that's great. And just the potential for them turning off and on and lighting up at night. I think that's great. If we could address shade, and more shade, maybe through including grass and additional plantings. I don't know. I think that would be great. But here I go again, bringing it back to cost. Whatever you do with the LEDs, I would like to see what an estimate annual operating cost would be for LEDs or uplighting, or an annual operating cost of and I like the mayor's idea of that, of the granite ball. Do we need to include, does it have to be chlorinated to pool level standards because now it's a fountain? Where would that equipment be? See, I talked about design, now I'm back at cost. But, the ongoing operations and maintenance, it concerns me, because you can build the LEDs very nice and they're flush with the ground. LEDs can fail. I mean, they're very reliable. What does that look like? How do we change them out? Yeah. Can it be incorporated into the design where it's very easy to change them out? If it is some, and I recall before, and I don't know if you pointed out, but you are saying that they would be interactive lights. They'd be turning on and off at different times, or just on at night and.
With the LED lights.
Yeah.
Those could be programmed to be interactive and move if they wanted to. So they're very
at a cost.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I would say, we're just at a concept level right now. There's
Sure.
a lot of detail that would be fleshed out in terms of longevity, maintenance,
Right.
et cetera, and cost. That all needs to get vetted. But there is the possibility to bring animation to the lighting by having it come on and off at different times.
Right, and so what that would look like in terms of, I mean, I think this is what we're getting at, that I think in general the concept is getting closer. There are a few items that need to be addressed, but what does that look like? The equipment cost, the maintenance. Is it a controller box that you can dial remotely into? Is it something you have to keep? I'm concerned about not only initial costs, but then ongoing operations and maintenance.
As you should be.
Yeah.
Councilor Curling?
Well, I'm listening to all this. I wasn't here at the former on the former council, so I missed all the discussion. I'm still a little confused about your granite ball. You're going to have a 3-dimensional nucleus and a 2-dimensional electron shell? Is that your suggestion?
Yes, that's exactly what we're proposing.
I'm not sure I would go along with that.
It would be really hard to do a 3-dimensional electron cloud.
Yeah, well, I know.
We originally
That's
had a DSP. We had the orbital hybridization in the original sculpture, but that I thought it was great, but it wasn't as popular as some.
I think you need a tree in the middle. Not, I guess, my opinion, a big shade tree in the middle of this. I like the LEDs though, and I just assumed they'd figure out a way that you could replace them. You wouldn't bury these in cement without a way.
Well, they're in stone, so.
Okay, well, somehow you'd have to. And I think Bob, Councilman Warner's point about a little more grass is also a good idea. That's a good point. I mean, this summer here, as Councilman McCrumer's also pointed out, that's going to be pretty reflective and pretty hot, I think, in the middle of the summer. So if there's something you could do to soften that, I think that'd be a great idea. But I'm for a big tree. I have birch trees that have lived in my front yard for 30-plus years, so I wouldn't advocate a birch tree there, but I can tell you that birch trees can grow in Livermore. So,
Councilmember Cooper?
I think I stated most of what I wanted to say, and I think I'm in agreement in many aspects of what everybody had to say here. I'd love to preserve that as a shady spot for those of us who go down there to eat, drink coffee, and mingle, and at any time of the year we want, It's always a little cooler under those trees when it's 115 out anywhere else. It's only a mere 105 under the trees. But it's a great place to go. I don't like the idea of the concrete unabated all year long. It's a great idea in February, but once you get into May and June and beyond, the great apocalyptic abyss that we drop into here every summer, we need to find a way to preserve shade. But I'm generally on board with the features. I kind of also believe that in addition to the science factor that certainly is needed and educational, so is nature. So I'd like to see those things both represented if we could down there, whether it's with trees, grass, whatever, a place to, I don't want to go down there when it's, shouldn't have to say this, I don't think, but on the concrete sitting blocks, I just don't picture me sitting on one, or anybody else, especially if they're wearing shorts in the middle of August. It just doesn't look like a good place, so, just want to try and make it a little more compatible to the casual passerby and with some shade we need. But I love the idea. We need to celebrate Livermorium at every opportunity, although I cannot break it down into atomic components like the other three council members can here. They can't tell me how to grow a birch tree in Livermore. So yeah, I just consider that when we go to just the natural feature.
Honorable Mayor.
So you have 5 people and 5 completely
All right, so
different
let's see if we can draw some themes here to give some direction to staff here. And so I want to clarify. Universally heard, essentially more shade. So you're looking for, at least during the warmer months, sort of March through the end of October, a fairly significant portion of the plaza to be shaded from, big chunk of the middle of the day, 10 to 3, something like that. So lots of shade. So make sure we plant trees in the plaza area that throw a lot of shade onto the area. I got at least 3 there, okay? Second one is, this was a little iffier, but a little less hardscape. So comfort with sort of the central area being hardscape, but perhaps around the edges, perhaps the rear edge, maybe the consideration of turf as a material. Was that direction there? Okay. Third item was essentially tree versus art at the center. And we got strong opinions on that. And we heard definitively, absolutely tree, absolutely art, round, wet, large granite
kinetic
ball.
thing.
And that one's a little less clear to us. At that point, do you want to have a discussion to give us some direction? Do you want us to simply hold that spot? And you guys can
with the kinetic ball.
So that was
good with the tree.
The one. So
Can I ask one question as you
Yes.
go through that? I mean, one option is that center has whatever the art is, and I like the sphere. I think that's interesting. But couldn't you have a ring of trees around that?
Absolutely. With I'm trying to get the direction, and then we can bring you back an option once that does that. If it's sort of my
So the
objective
trees
here
on
is
the
to have
outside, the ball
is
in
to
the
have a
middle.
lot of shade on the plaza, basically, but to have a high canopy so you can see into it. I think we can release our design professionals with that sort of direction. Obviously, you have a very specific orientation on the site. Putting essentially tall trees to the south of the site will throw shade onto that plaza area. Putting a lot of stuff on the north edge will do almost nothing from that perspective. So we do have some room in the design to sort of adjust the tree species that are along peats to get a little bit of height there to throw some shade. We also have some other abilities, like you said, perhaps to incorporate the trees as either a ring around or something that would emphasize the actual ground level sculpture, which brings me to the next piece, which is the ground level sculpture with the medallions and or the LED was generally seen as positive, with a concern to make sure that we have a lot of clarity on the actual LED, that its long-term maintenance cost and other things. Having 108 of the lights work isn't nearly as much fun, and or having it cost an enormous amount to change a light bulb or maintain it. So that would be a problem we would need to solve before moving forward, but that the concept seemed intriguing.
And one of the other potential cool things that you could do would be to work with one of the nonprofits and similar to what they did with the leaves with rotary. Use that, or like when they sold bricks at the Bankhead. You could buy one of these discs or LEDs and use that as, so you got 116 of them, you sell them at $1,000 a piece, and you got 100 grand. And so that would be a way to help bridge some of this and to make some of this work.
The last item is an item that we had included in this design, but maybe wasn't clearly shown, was essentially the screening wall between the open parking lot that's immediately to the east. That would be part of the design, and also would be done in a way, should that property redevelop, to be able to open that side up. In other words, if there were a restaurant or something else in that area, ultimately to allow tables and chairs to spill in from that side as well. So essentially, the one open question that you could give us direction on is what that center object is, whether you wish to consider a particular piece of art. We've heard a couple of folks sort of say, they know what that is, and versus a tree.
I think you have the trees around that, so you still have the shade. But at the other hand,
So is the issue, and I guess that's what the clarification is the issue shade on the plaza area, or is the issue that the focus should be a central specimen tree?
My focus would be to have something that's interactive, kinetic, something that draws children into that space. And then at the same time, that becomes the centerpiece, that becomes the nucleus, not only of Livermorium, but the nucleus for the park itself.
I've got to one.
You got two.
Okay, two.
But you put the ring of trees around.
Got it.
Cost. I would spec it out in terms of if we can get a general, how much more does that add, and where would the money be coming from for this? I mean, if we have to start talking about pumps and equipment and what the long-term costs are, if that starts getting a little out of hand, then I would be in favor of tree.
Okay. Your specimen tree, the concept is it was going to be a big one. It was not going to be a 5-gallon tree sitting in the center of there. So you were going to spend some resources, but that's a fair comment. We can spec both out and at least give you.
Well, wait a second.
Actually, aren't that expensive?
Wait. I mean, you don't. I mean, the way you want to make sure I understood what you said. I mean, in my mind, the trade-off isn't between a pump and a tree. I mean, you don't have to have a pump, and you can still have a ring of trees. You don't. I mean, the question is, do you want some object that commemorates Livermorium or some kind of art versus a tree? And then if you have the object, then you have a ring of trees. But that object doesn't have to have necessarily a pump. So the question is, on your design preference, do you want one central tree or do you want a ring of trees with a object in the middle?
Well, then I wouldn't know how the ring of trees would work if you have the LED lights. Are you saying get rid of the LED lights, put a ring of trees, and then the central object? Or do you say ring of LED lights, central object, and then a ring of trees around that? I don't know how that would necessarily work.
Well, we don't know, but I mean, it might.
Well, ring of trees, central object, and electron discs around it, or LEDs around it.
Yeah.
But that's. I mean, the question is, you don't know that it's precluded, but the real question is, do you want shade, and do you want to get it through a set of trees or one big one? There's a lot of. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, in my mind. So anyway, I would have a set of trees just because things happen to trees.
I just don't know how that, if we still had the map up, how that would work when you have that central ring of LED lights and then another ring of trees. I just can't picture it right now. And maybe we're saying go back and do kind of a redesign of the plaza at this point. Is that what I'm seeing? It's if we were to do another ring of trees, it would be a redesign of the
Yes, that's
of the whole thing.
We would have to revisit the entire composition.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I mean, I was thinking it's more of a, central shade tree versus, another object. And then if you had the perimeter trees, if they have the ability to shade that plaza area, I don't know. I mean, I value the shade and maximizing the shade, so I think I would lean towards center tree.
Oh, but just while you got that up, there's where the concrete is between the electrons and the concrete arches. You could put a tree.
But then you can't walk there.
But you don't.
We've already got those shade trees to the,
Anyway,
to the
what
south.
I'm trying to, we're trying to get to at least 3 that are willing to consider the ring of trees. So you're obviously no, but do we have anybody else that wants to consider a ring of trees?
Well, I think if we have the ring of trees, we don't need to have the center tree. We don't need the center tree if we have the ring of trees, and that's so free.
We're not getting to 3.
Well, that's, we're still having that discussion. But you have that center object, which is the kinetic, it's interactive, and it's water. And those are 3 things that we heard over and over again from the public, that they wanted something that was interactive and hands-on. And I think a tree isn't going to do that because unless the kids are climbing the tree and that creates.
Yeah, but before we go to a particular thing, what's shown here is some kind of object in the center without a tree. So the question is our choice simply an object in the center or a tree? And I'm willing to believe there are other choices, and I would like to at least have it looked at.
Well, that's why you were talking about having the ring of trees. And I said we've got the ring of trees to the south. We could put in another ring.
Right. So the question is, it doesn't have to be a full ring. It might be, but is the only choice to have the shade that we want with a tree in the center of that ring? That's the question. I think there are other options.
I agree with you. I think there are other options.
We need one other person to agree with us, or we're not going to have that studied.
Now, okay, I have an issue with calling out, another ring of trees and saying where they should be located. If we could get additional trees on the site, I'd be interested in looking at that. But it's still some type of sculpture that requires water and a water hookup and a pump. I need to know the cost before, if we could get a general estimate, because that could be a non-starter for me if it adds $200K to the project.
Right.
Well, I don't know.
Wait, can we do one thing at a time? Right.
Sure.
First of all, are there other options for shade other than one big tree in the middle of that? I mean, are 3 of us willing to consider that?
Of course, there are other options. I just don't. I mean, I appreciate the kinetic, the water, and so on and so forth. I just don't like the idea that well, for one thing, I don't really understand. I can't picture in my mind this gigantic hunk of.
But can we do one topic at a time?
That I am doing.
Okay, so we got 3 people that are willing.
I'm
to
not
talk
against a ring of trees. It's.
Okay, good. We got 3.
with a thing in the middle, something with possibly a potential thing in the middle.
I just don't. Well, I frankly don't like that idea.
So, and then in asking the consultant if we added a ring of trees, would that be a complete redesign of the center? And your response is
Yes.
So we are throwing out this design completely with the seating and asking for a ring of trees.
So one option might be to bring the landscape in closer to the center and look at a larger palette of trees and maybe some soft material, maybe a little bit of grass. It might not change dramatically, but you might shrink the area of concrete that's there in the center and bring the trees.
I was going to say, we've already, I think I saw 5 of us say we don't want that much concrete. Therefore, we are changing the design. Okay, so now the design has changed, and we've all said we want a lot of shade. The only question is, can we have some variability in the design of that shade? And it's for another time to talk about what the exact object is in the middle.
Not that big. That's kind of jump. Yeah. Not that big, and not with a pool.
Good.
Not with a pool.
Well, clearly the site, if the site is going to go through remediation, nothing's going to be allowed to stand there, is what I'm gathering here. I mean, that's the idea, that nothing will be allowed to stand. And I think of all 3 kids growing up and going to Santa Claus down there, and all the emotional value that Christmas around that tree is to those downtown as another factor in this that I wasn't really going to bring up. If it can't be saved because of the remediation, I'll certainly grab onto other ideas. I would just prefer that if there were a way that it could stay there. That after we make all these changes in August, and here's our Christmas parade, and all the kids come down to gather by the tree, and the tree's not there anymore. It's going to be a big shock to a lot of people, and people who've grown up here and been through that. So just something to think, another thing to think about while we're thinking about things, and that's an important piece, I think, that we missed. But I would ultimately go along if we had to do this and remove everything there and just dig it up. Then yeah, I'd certainly go with a ring of trees around there if that were the case. If that were the case. But I'm good with looking nostalgically at the past sometimes.
So just to clarify, unfortunately, the front trees in particular, Bruce, the actual holiday tree there actually does have contamination immediately adjacent to it, because one of our questions was to actually move that tree. First of all, very difficult, extremely expensive, and the likelihood of survival certainly less than 100% on that. But one of the problems was where the contamination was created. You'd be moving the contamination or severely impacting the tree. And so we will take a close look at the area that needs to be remediated, but my recollection is that it's virtually the entire site. And the depth of that is something that we'll be exploring during further design. So from that perspective, you are starting, unfortunately, with a little bit of a blank slate there. I think we're starting to pin down some of the pieces there. So we'll at least... it sounded like there was, so if we addressed the shade issue, we would need to bring back a design that had more shade over the hardscape, less hardscape, perhaps the introduction of turf in an area, but we'd have to take a look at that. That's a little softer direction there. And the last piece is at least consideration of a piece of art in the middle or a tree. And boy, you guys are pretty evenly divided on that one. Did they take a look at the art and maybe a couple of different variations on an art and with some costing?
Cost considerations.
Okay.
Because I don't know what the water meter situation is there, but if you have to upgrade a water meter, that's like, what, $150K? So
okay,
it's just...
so from that perspective, at least we're going to consider a piece of art. We'll take a look at all of the costing issues, because at least one of the questions is for the overall project, where this fits in the scale of cost versus all of the things we're trying to accomplish down there. Are there other direction that you'd like to make sure that the next version that returns to you includes?
I hope we don't lose the electrons.
Okay. And we will hurry back to you so that we can perhaps by or early summer basically finalize at least a conceptual design that we can then get further direction on so that we can start the entitlement process. That'll allow us to move forward with the remediation as well, at least the final negotiations on remediation. Scott, is there further direction that we need at this point, or do we have sufficient?
I think that's sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're coming back. Okay. All right. It's 9 o'clock, and there's usually a request for about a 5 or 10-minute break at 9 o'clock. So let's take 5 minutes, and I'll be back here shortly. Okay, very good. Welcome back. We're moving on. We got through 6.01. We're now moving on to 6.02, which is a discussion and direction on the I Street Garage study. And we have Sherry Sheets, Joel Waxstack, and Carlos Sandiego leading in charge here.
Yes, Mayor Marchand and council members. In addition to staff who's seated here, we have another staff person, Scott Lee, who's our planner on this project. And we have from Watry Bueller, who's our parking consultant, Thomas Towie and Nick Watry, both seated behind us. And for Fair and Piers, our traffic consultant, we have Rob Reese and Teresa Peterson. So they're all here if we need any questions answered. So tonight we're presenting the preliminary findings of the I Street Garage feasibility study, which considers parking garage options adjacent to the existing Livermore Valley Center garage. The Livermore Valley Center garage is located on Railroad Avenue, directly across from the Bankhead Theater, and just east of Livermore Avenue. So Livermore Railroad, and here's the existing garage, 3-level garage. The city owns some additional property directly adjacent to the garage. That's this blue area here. This is all city-owned parcels. The downtown specific plan establishes certain policies that govern traffic and parking in the downtown. The city has a level of service standard for intersections throughout the entire city, and it's established as a mid-level level of service D. However, the downtown is specifically exempt from that policy because we strive to make the downtown a pedestrian-oriented place. We will consider that criteria, however, because it helps us to determine what the impacts to traffic and congestion are for the various options. We also have parking requirements identified in the downtown specific plan. We require 1 parking space for every 300 square foot of commercial space that we add, unless the parking is considered shared parking, such as in a parking lot for joint use or in a parking garage. In that case, we reduce the standard to 1 space per 400 square feet. In addition to that, we have height limits. 45 foot is the maximum height limit in the downtown, except there are exceptions for public facilities, such as the bank and theater, and that could also apply to a garage if you chose to do so. The existing conditions, we took a look at the existing conditions. The current garage, Livermore Valley Center Garage, is 508 spaces. And it is heavily utilized when we have popular events at both the banquet and the cinema. The 508 spaces are spread over 3 levels, and it's a total of 22 foot high. That's to the actual base level of the floor, not the railing height. We took a look at garage operations and discovered that we have some congestion points, especially associated with the pedestrian movements, both inside the garage and across Railroad Avenue. And that affects the efficiency of the entering and exiting traffic of the garage itself. At the 2 critical intersections, Livermore and Railroad and Maple and First, we already have a mid-level D level of service. And finally, the other thing we've observed is that the current left turn pockets on Railroad Avenue, both at the intersection and at the garage entry points, are the limiting factor for us. Right now, they can barely minimally sustain access to the garage where it is and operations at the intersections. Let me see, sorry. Due to the limitations associated with the queuing capacity on Railroad Avenue and the entry-exit capacity at the garage itself, the proposed project is limited to 375 parking spaces. The project requires modifications to extend the left-turn queue pocket on Railroad Avenue that accesses the garage entry points all the way back to Livermore Avenue, so we have to extend that queue. We also require a new entry point, which is proposed at I Street. The garage, as proposed, could provide parking in the downtown to accommodate a 135-room hotel, plus 14,000 square foot of ancillary space, plus any parking displaced by the footprint of the hotel, and it would leave you with another 100 spaces for other items within the downtown, other development within the downtown. This is a graphic depiction of the extension of the left turn pocket. So we'd extend it all the way to Livermore Avenue, and we would add a left turn pocket into I Street, which would be the secondary access point into the garage. It does require that we modify the frontage, take a part of the frontage in front of the Speedy Loop site. The city studied 6 different garage options. The first option is, let's just put it on the property we already own. That's this blue property here. Part of this is I Street, which is a city public street, and then the other parcels are parcels that we own. This option, we called it option 1, is the tallest. It's 45 feet tall, but it fits entirely within the city's own property. It's tucked behind the existing businesses, So security must be fully addressed. It is set back all the way at the backside of I Street. So I Street actually provides for some queuing and stacking capacity, which helps the garage operations. Option 2, option 1 in our garage has this little notch out because we don't own this parcel. So option 2 simply carves this out to be a more rectangular piece by purchasing a small area of the vacant parcel on the west side. That option is 37 feet tall, and it requires the purchase of the portion of the vacant lot. It allows for a more efficient layout of spaces. The existing businesses, and that's both the water bottling service and the auto transmission shop, would remain. It is tucked behind those businesses, so security issues still need to be addressed. And once again, it still has the area that is along I Street that you could queue and stack in, so that again helps operations of the garage itself. Option 3 is an option where we take the city's parcel and then we purchase both the auto business and the water business, and the properties we purchase the properties and the businesses. So it requires acquisition of those two businesses. The beauty of that one is that the entire garage height can be match the existing garage height at 22 feet. It's very efficient layout, and therefore it's pretty cost effective per stall. Unfortunately, one of the property owners has shown no interest in selling their property. There also is no setback. It's actually brought all the way forward to the front of Railroad Avenue, and therefore stacking would have to occur only in the street itself, not within the garage. Or if it stacks within the garage, it affects the actual parking operations. Option 4 is similar to option 3, except that we purchase both properties, but we set the garage back 50 feet so that we can have retail space allowed along the frontage to maybe activate that area. That also requires acquisition of the two existing properties and businesses. It does create a commercial space frontage along Railroad Avenue. That may be challenging because this area is somewhat isolated from other retail businesses, and that could be a challenge for some retail. It would also be 22 foot tall along the major frontage. So most of the garage along here would be 20 foot tall. There would be a portion in the back side that would have to be 33 feet tall. Again, there is one owner that has indicated no interest in selling his property. Option 5 is an option to the east of the garage, and it requires acquisition of two properties and two businesses there, one a veterinary business and one an auto business. It is further away from the major downtown core businesses, and it is unique in that we did a extra high level first floor so that we could put in mechanical parking, 3-level stacked parking, and therefore you get a very efficient use of space. The downside of having mechanical parking is you really can't self-park with it. It really is useful when you're valeting. You have somebody valeting parking. There's also an ongoing maintenance cost associated with the operations and maintenance of the mechanical parking. The final thing about that option is that it would complicate operations for LAFTA's bus facility over here because accessing into the garage would impact how the buses come in and out of that location. And finally, the city looked at option 6, which was again the city's parcels in conjunction with only the Culligan, so it's the purple area here, the Culligan site. This owner has shown interest in considering acquisition of the city acquiring the property, and the garage would be 22 foot tall for the first 60 feet and 33 feet tall about a third of the portion of the backside of the business. The existing auto business would be retained.
I'm sorry, the existing auto business
Would stay in place in that case for option 6. Okay. The city took a look at traffic and parking analysis for the project. I say here the hotel generates additional parking, but it's really the project in total generates about 246 BMP car trips. Sorry. The level of service we looked at the hotel being either on the east side or the west side. East side where Speedy Lube is, or west side directly adjacent to the Blacksmith Square. Results show that the level of service at Livermore and Railroad degrades to a level service E. And the eastbound left turn is the critical movement for that intersection. Maple at first is slightly degraded, but it still remains a level of service D at that location. The city would consider mitigations. For example, we can look at extending the eastbound left turn at Livermore Avenue. In addition, we can look at coordinating signal timing from Chestnut all the way to 4th Street on Livermore Avenue. Because we wanted that to be a pedestrian-friendly environment, we did not coordinate those signals or the mid-block crosswalks associated with them. We could consider doing that maybe even just in the PM peak to help auto travel through that corridor and make things a little more balanced. Tonight, staff is asking the council to take a look at the traffic and parking analysis for this and provide us with direction on any additional analysis you'd like, and also narrowing down the alternatives, preferably to 1, but if not 1, maybe 2. That completes our presentation. We're happy to go.
Okay, thank you. Questions for staff at this point?
I'm not familiar with these level of service grades, D and E. I assume that means not so good?
That's correct. Typically, level of service, most cities adopt a level of service D as a acceptable level. The delay, it's determined by how much delay you would expect at each individual. That's about a 40 to 45 second delay every time you get to the intersection. E's are generally considered unacceptable. You would have to sit through a cycle more than once potentially at those types of intersections.
But a D is acceptable? Is that what you said?
D is generally determined for most cities to be an acceptable level of service.
Okay, thank you.
Question about option 6. Oh, I'm sorry, option 5. With the mechanical parking, what happens if there's a power failure?
It fails, right? Yeah, with a power failure, you're kind of stuck. Your car is stuck. Let me put it that way.
Okay, so the car is stuck. Otherwise, you'd have to have an auxiliary generator or
Right.
something on the site, which would then additional maintenance to maintain
Correct.
that. And then the other question is, somebody goes to work, and all of a sudden they have to leave early, and they're on top, and there's already somebody below them. How do they get out?
So with valet parking, what happens if
this
that's
would
the
be
case?
valeted,
Yeah, this is valeted, so the gentleman would come and move the one car out of the way, then lower the lift and move you out. So.
Okay, I've actually seen these down south, but
Yeah.
okay, very good, thank you. Vice Mayor.
I had a question. I mean, do we have a solid estimate as to how many valet stalls would be required by a hotel? I'm seeing in all the options, it's ranging from 118 to 97 to like 20. I don't know, what's the...
The total parking demand for the hotel, including the ancillary uses, was 195 spaces.
So that would be whatever we build, we can assume 195 are right off the top for valet?
For the hotel and its valet, yes.
So the 195 is just off limits 24/7. It's not like peak hotel, or is it flexible?
It's flexible, so you could choose to designate all 195 as valet, or you could choose a portion of it to be valet and the remainder to be they have to hunt like you would.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep that in mind when we're talking about numbers, and some of the lower numbers. If it's 190 valet at some point, whether it's flexible or permanent, that takes it. Well, 190 takes a large chunk out of any scenario. So.
And one of the items to keep in mind is that was a very specific size hotel. That's essentially a 135-room hotel. Moving that number up or down obviously affects the parking count. It's not meant to be determinative of a parking. The parking was meant to follow at least a proposal that we had. Ultimately, the community decides, what it wants from a hotel, and we'll park it. But we wanted to give you a sense of scale.
The other question, through any of these designs, is it possible? I see, the circulation plans for the first level, which is great, but is it possible to have circulation between the two parking garages on multiple levels?
Yes, and in fact, all of them have.
All of them have that. So
yes,
they're crossed between. Okay,
that's
good.
correct.
Because you only gave me floor one, so it's and then just clarifying on page, I guess it's 273 where it says option 3 level 1. That is indeed option 3 because the rendering says option 4 on it. So that is what I'm seeing in the lower right-hand corner in the kind of tannish yellow, option 3. That's option 3. Just clarifying.
That is indeed option 3.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
All right, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Councilmember Carling?
And the materials that we got ahead of time, I was looking at option 1 on the bike trail. That's
yes.
So it says bike trail above for option 1. What? And then option 2, the bike trail was some.
Option 1.
Can you explain the bike trail? What happens to the bike trail?
Yeah. So the bike trail, the pedestrian and bicycle bridge that comes across.
Right.
In order to continue that it has to be on city property. So the first level, the surface level of the option 1 garage is actually taken up by a bike trail.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So the bike trail remains then?
Yes.
One other question too.
Vice Mayor?
And then, so which options include the potential for a pedestrian bridge? That would be 3, 4, and 6?
So
right.
Actually, any of the garages can have a pedestrian bridge. In terms of options, the two options, option 1 and 2, which are tucked in behind, and option 5, which is to the east, you would put the pedestrian bridge across from the existing garage at Livermore Valley Center, where our tower currently is, and which was originally thought of as a future design element to extend a bridge across there. It would then fall into the plaza adjacent to, on the east side of the Bankhead Theater on the major pedestrian corridor. On options 3, 4, and 6, where we're taking additional land to the west of ours and bringing it forward to or near Railroad Avenue, you would put the pedestrian bridge across to the new garage, and it could land, if the hotel is on the east side, it could land at the hotel site and be integrated into the hotel design.
The bridge must go at the 3rd story for clearance issues?
It has to be a minimum of 14 foot above. So it's, yeah.
So it would be, okay, so whatever goes in on the east side would have to be 3 stories tall to accommodate the bridge, or you would have
3 levels tall.
3 levels tall.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, I have some cards, speaker cards. John Stein, Jeff Caskey, Catherine Barker. Mr. Stein.
John Stein, I would support option 3. I think the more parking, the better. It's the lowest cost per stall, and it doesn't have the commercial on Railroad Avenue, which I think would be a problematic location. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Jeff Caskey, Catherine Barker, and Ellen Burnham.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jeff Caskey. I also liked option 3. I think you might want to consider picking up the other property as well. Might be able to reduce some of the height of the parking lot. Could get some expanded parking space and make I think the less number of levels you have to drive up a lot more. It's going to make the parking a lot more attractive. In general, I think I understand that we don't have a requirement for level of service in downtown, but for the parking around the parking garage, I think that's really a place where we do want to focus on making it comfortable for people to park so that the rest of it is very walkable. I think if we extend the parking garage over to the west side, consider stairs to access the existing pedestrian bridge that goes over Livermore Avenue. That would take a bunch of pedestrians, including the path that I walk. Makes it a whole lot easier to avoid having to cross railroad. So I think there's some interesting stuff in the plan. The study was a good start. I did kind of miss looking at the details of the hotel locations or traffic impacts there. It was as noted, it was a single point study for a 135 room hotel. Didn't really talk about the sensitivity to the number of spaces going up to 200 down to 100, whatever. I'd really like to see a follow-on study to this in order for this to be useful to our work on the downtown project. I think this is an interesting study for an I Street garage, but we really would like to consider how this fits into the planning that we're going to be doing for downtown. I think there's still a lot of information to be added to figure that out. One of the items that wasn't detailed in there is what items would have to be handled if they were to create this as paid parking, and how would that mix fit into the mix. So I think in addition, as an overall parking study, again, this is interesting stuff. I'd like to see. And here's where I'm an engineer, I apologize. But I'd like to see a little bit more about when if it's going to be queuing, how many times a day are we going to have to worry about level of service impacts at the intersections, or how many times a year? Is it really only for 5 really good shows and events and other things going on, or is this the kind of activity that we would see day in and day out at the intersection? So I think it's going to help as the steering committee works to present this to the public, and then as the public looks to absorb this information, I think it'll help to have a little bit more color to how the parking impacts the downtown and how the traffic impacts that as well. Also looking, to add one more thing, to how this fits in with other possible parking locations that have been talked about, and how that would help mitigate. If you had a hotel that allowed parking that was on the west side, does that help mitigate some of the level of service problems on the east side? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Caskey. Catherine Barker, Alan Burnham. Ms. Barker.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Barker. I reside on South Livermore Avenue. The thing that I did not hear in this report was whether this was actually a real need or a perceived need. There was no talk about the number of spaces we have currently available in the existing parking structure or the number of ground spaces available downtown. As a downtown resident, I walk downtown quite frequently, and if I am more than 1 block from First Street, there is ample parking most times, even at peak events. I think a lot of Livermore residents think enough parking is parking that's close to their destination, either directly in front of the business they wish to access or directly behind it. This is none of those locations, and so I'm concerned that it will not be heavily utilized. I'm also very concerned about pedestrian safety to and from this parking garage. The current parking garage has 1 light which pedestrians access, and they all form a gaggle right in front of the entrance and exit to the parking garage. That's not a particularly safe spot. And I'm also concerned about the added traffic in the downtown area. Livermore and Railroad is a fairly dangerous intersection. Cars do not like to stop. They don't see you coming up the hill. They aren't looking for you. So what actions will be taken, especially if we widen Railroad, to make that a good access point? I think that this parking structure encourages single occupant vehicle travel rather than reducing our overall number of vehicles entering downtown, and the level of service discussion supports that point. Reducing the total number of vehicle trips to downtown is something that is in the general plan, and I don't see how this is supporting that. I also am wondering about the environmental impact of this parking garage, not just the structure, but also the increased traffic going to that structure. But my greatest concern is the cost. This is $17 million, and there's a lot of things we can get for $17 million. Earlier, we were talking about the cost of Livermore Plaza, and it is a fraction of this price. Each stall costs about $45,000. So I wanted to find out what else we could get for that money. And for $45,000, you can get 2 years worth of rent for a single family, 1-bedroom apartment. We have a housing crisis, so we could house someone for 2 years. We could also, for 3 spaces, hire 1 police officer. We could hire, or for 29 spaces, we could build a 1-mile bike lane. These are other options we have to reduce total traffic and congestion downtown. We could look at other options such as better bike parking, better street lighting so that people don't feel endangered walking home at night. We could also use this extra money to repair the broken Arroyo Trail, which was damaged by this year's rains. These are various options that we have as a city, and we can choose to use our money wisely. If our budget is our policy, what are we saying with this? Thank you.
Ms. Barker, thank you very much. Great comments. Alan Burnham.
Yeah, Alan Burnham on Findlay Way. First of all, I'd like to remind you of what I'm sure you remember is that the businesses on First Street were very concerned about no parking if that area is developed, because most of the parking that's there is going to disappear. So that this is in fact a request to put other parking in so that when they take out the other parking, there's still some place to go. So I'm sure you all remember that. I just want to remind you. The second thing I want to ask you is to eliminate option 5. It's a bad idea for all sorts of reasons, cost per space, but also it's really best for event parking. And event parking is really not a good idea when you have a valet or a throughput, because it's not only capacity, it's also throughput, and it will be a disaster. So please eliminate number 5. I think you should also direct staff to look at, as Jeff Caskey said, combining the D'Souza property with option 3, 4, or 6. If Tech Transmissions won't sell, then maybe a combination of Ising and D'Souza may solve something. And the final thing is, I remember talking to Joan Seppala 15 years ago when she was twisting my arm for money for the Bankhead Theater, that we really needed to have a pedestrian overpass, and of course there wasn't any money, and there seems like there's never any money. But I would point out that my experience is a large fraction of the congestion down there, the traffic congestion, which means the people backing up trying to turn left, is because the pedestrians are taking, it takes 30 seconds or so, and so you have an extra 30 seconds for the left turn traffic to back up. So I suggest that perhaps if it was not included, that the study take a look at the impact of a pedestrian overpass on the need for the left turn capacity, because I think they are coupled in ways that was not obvious from the report. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Burnham. Okay, that's it for the cards. Close the comment period, and we'll bring it back to the council. What's the comments? Councilmember Warner.
Well, thank you for the study, and I think this is what we need to do. And I think, as Mr. Stein pointed out, and Mr. Burnham said, we need to get some parking there so that we can deal with the rest of the downtown. So, and so, I think this is a good set of options. I want to say that with my experience with parking garages is that they are nothing more than a necessary evil, and the more levels you have to go through in one of these things, the worse it is. So I'm very much in favor of the minimum number of levels for the space, and I think I'm also in favor of a pedestrian bridge. So I'll just say my bottom line here is that, given what I just said, options 3 and 6, preferably 3. And maybe getting more of the land is preferable, and you get the better levels and the connection. But so I would go with, let's understand 3 and 6 in more detail and the options there.
Okay.
Are we moving
Vice Mayor?
now?
I guess so. I didn't see anybody jumping on this side, so let's bring it down this way.
Sure. And I'd also like to take a minute to remind our city engineer that if you want one option, I think you gave us 5 too many. Typically, if you want one selection from a council, give us 2 at most. But no, and I do appreciate all the options. It's very thorough, and I think we have fully studied this area. I would agree with 3 and 6, in particular for myself, option 3, matching the existing levels of the parking garage to the right, also providing the maximum number of spaces. I would like to ask, though, that while we look into all of this and eventually getting into some of the finer details, that we look into some kind of smart parking system. That was part of a Nelson Nygaard study, which outlined some of the parking issues that we do have throughout the downtown. I think one of the ones that I was impressed with, I happened to take a trip to Westfield Valley Fair Mall in Santa Clara, and it tells you what levels, what spaces are available, and then as you go down the aisles, you can actually see the lights. Doesn't look too expensive because it is, they are just cameras on a pole, but I'm sure, there's a cost associated with everything, but limiting the number of trips, because that's also what you see. You have that one person that just is sure as anything that spot's going to open up if they just keep driving in circles, and then you have the person walking to the car with the bag and they're just following them like sharks. But anyway, any way that we can avoid that and show the capacity of the parking structure. I do want to mention, though, the need for this, and it is, and Councilmember Warner touched on this, is we are replacing spaces that will be taken up by the downtown development. So we need to address the potential for removing how many spaces on the dirt lot Lucky's. That's approximately what?
150?
Depending on how behaved people are, when they just randomly park on the dirt lot, you're looking at what, 350?
Go ahead.
Total of 560 spaces.
So 560 spaces on the,
including the dirt lot.
Including the dirt lot. So we are, this is replacing spaces to build something, and I do appreciate the comment about the cost. 17 million is not chump change, and you can do a lot for 17 million. But I would like to point out that focusing on capital projects for that money, when you're talking operating in terms of paying for rent or hiring police officers, that a source that you're using for capital, if you use it for staffing or other projects, capital costs, they're a one-time deal. You know how much you're paying, you know what you're getting, and that's it. But long-term operating, you hire officers with capital money, eventually that runs out, then what do you do? So you look for sustainable uses for the money, but I do appreciate the comments because, yeah, parking garages, boy, who knew that they're that expensive to put up? But in summary, 3 and 6.
Okay. Councilmember Carling?
Yeah, I have to admit that I'm not a fan of 3 because of the need to purchase land from somebody that doesn't want to sell. So 6, I'd like 6. I would also suggest that we look at paid parking. I'm frequently in Alameda. We have grandkids that live over there, and they have a parking garage there, and it's paid parking, and it works great from my point of view. And they have, so I would suggest that we take that, have a serious look at that. Getting back to option 3 again, I guess I could be convinced of 3 if somebody gave me a good reason why we would want to twist somebody's arm. But right now I'm not a fan of 3 because of that.
All right. Councilmember Coomber?
Well, my trips downtown are long documented. When I used to write a column for local paper here in town many years ago, and made a point this time of year, every year, to talk about getting your family together and walking downtown or rolling downtown or some safe way to exercise yourself. The complication with all this is that we have finite numbers of spaces down there, and 500 of them are going away. We want to make sure that we're a good city in which to run a small business, to do business down on First Street, to create an atmosphere instead of empty businesses who have had to bail out because no one can park anywhere nearby, have a place to go. So if having to choose, I'd choose option 3 myself too, because I like the lower costs associated with it more than anything else. However, I will still trump it. I'm a big fan of getting out, walking, riding, rolling, however you get downtown. If you live within 2 or 3 miles, like I do, get out and do it that way. And maybe if we save some money on the parking spaces, we can improve the width of some of our bike lanes around downtown so we can make it safer for people to travel around. We've had one too many serious accidents on bikes because people are running through crosswalks or cutting off bike lanes. There's too many, and we've had more than one. And so I'd like to see. I don't envy Carlo at all, because he's going to have to come up with an idea to make this seem plausible when it all comes out. I try to picture it, and it's usually in the middle of the night when I'm having a nightmare about how traffic is going to go from South Livermore left on Railroad while people are trying to get into the parking garages. I'd be throwing up my hands. I'm glad it's your job, and I hope, I know you'll make it work, as you guys always do. But I'm really nervous about it because there's too much opportunity for congestion, not enough opportunity to widen roads. Things are there. You're not going to rebuild a railroad bridge going over there anytime soon, unless UP wants to not run trains through there for about a year. And I don't know. It makes perfect sense because we need the parking spaces. After that, the e-ticket ride, as Sherry told us, is you get to level E on a traffic impact, and you're down, you're pretty close to where I never wanted to be on a report card. So I'm just. Yeah, I like to push myself around, quite honestly, and that's just it's going to create some pedestrian nightmares too. We don't know, there are so many intersections in town that are hugely impacted for pedestrians when you get to Railroad, to Murrieta, to various parts which I've yelled about before. But I just would love to see people leave their cars at home. It's summer, at least for now. No one expects you to walk down there in a driving rain, but at least for now, get out there and walk and find out if the walk isn't too much, and maybe you can go down there and have a good evening by leaving the car at home. But if asked to choose, it's option 3. Okay,
thank you. The question was brought up, do we really need parking? Is there really a need for parking? And we had some some city hearings August 8th and August 1st of last year, and some of us still bear the scars from that one, where we had about 400 people demanding that we needed more parking downtown. And you've got other folks that are saying, well, but in 10 years, everybody's going to be Ubering downtown or lifting downtown, or they're going to be taking autonomous vehicles downtown. But that's not today. And we've heard from hundreds of people that they want more parking. And especially, as the Vice Mayor pointed out, we've got about 500 spaces that are going to be going away to something, and we aren't really sure what's going to go in there yet. That's all part of the planning process. A lot of moving pieces here, but we need to have a place to put a lot of those folks. And that's where we're looking at this parking garage to take up a lot of that. Also the issue came up about paid parking. That's another thing that maybe the steering committee could pull that. Just about everybody I hear is against paid parking, but maybe we can get a sense of where the community is on that. I think we're pretty sure where the community wants more parking, but maybe we should ask that question and see where that goes. Again, I also like options 3 and 6. My preference is option 3. I like the lower height because we can. It matches what we currently have, The fact that it comes out closer, it's easier to make that pedestrian connection, so you don't have to have the gaggle of people. I love the term. Queuing up to cross the street and holding traffic back as they're trying to waddle their way across. So I think that that helps us accomplish more. We heard from the community that they don't want large, massive structures in the downtown. And I think that what we already have, people understand that. We've already got a template that, yeah, we've got a 22 foot structure, and everybody understands that. I think that the whole idea of a 45-foot structure is just scary to some people. With 6 levels, you don't want to be going around and around and around. And I love the comment from the Vice Mayor about smart parking, about how when you enter a spot, I go up to Sacramento quite a bit, and in some of the parking garages there, they say, hey, parking starts on level 4. And you don't have to do that slow crawl around because you know where the parking is going to be. So I think that's a great idea. And again, it's relatively lower cost. I do appreciate the fact that it's frustrating to put this kind of money into parking, but it supports the businesses in the downtown. It supports the people coming into the downtown, which is where our community gathers. So my personal preference is I favor option 3. I also agree with the with Councilmember Carling. It's unfortunate that we have to talk to people that may not be willing to sell at this point in time, but this is a public use, a public need, and there's a public benefit for this. So there's certainly the precedent for that. So my feeling is I would go for option 3. So looks like we've got mostly options 3 and 6 here. So perhaps if there could be some additional study to bring back the refining information that we would need. Do we have a motion?
Well, I'll move we further study options 3 and 6 and get the more specifics on the trade-offs and more specifically on the costs and things. So that would be it. And then there was also, if I could move that, but can I also include that maybe think about the additional land that's included in there that might also help?
You talking about the property at the corner there?
Yeah. So that just, I think what we're, make the motion for 3 and 6 plus thinking about if the benefit of having that, the cost and benefit of the additional land. And I'll just editorialize. I mean, and this is what Councilman Vice Mayor Spadowski mentioned to me today. I mean, we have a chance to do this. I hadn't talked to any other one about it, but the but I liked his comment, and he hadn't said it so far, so I'll say it. Is that we really want to do this as best we can, and going to a suboptimal option is we don't want to do it because we've already got our current garage, which is, I think, suboptimal. So this is a chance to kind of fix things, and let's do it the best we can.
Okay, so a motion for options 3 and 6.
Second.
Second by the Vice Mayor. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion for 3 and 6, say by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Passed unanimously. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Is that a sufficient direction? Okay, very good. 6.03, this is the work plan for the goals and priorities that the council set at its 2017-2019 goal-setting workshop.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. On February 15th, the council held a workshop to refine its goals and priorities as it does every 2 years. The council does this in anticipation to give direction to staff, both on the development of a work plan and also direction for us to develop a budget. As was mentioned earlier, a budget is where your goals and priorities manifest themselves through resource allocation. and the council went through the process of goal setting. Tonight we are returning with the work program that staff proposes under each of those goal areas, and I want to spend just a couple of minutes walking through that. So the goals and priorities that the council chose were disaster preparedness and public safety. The next three basically tie to the financial health of the city. First with long-term financial stability, the second with our largest outstanding financial obligation that we are still working on all of the processes of asset management to make sure that we can sustain the infrastructure that the city does own in the long term in a cost-effective and efficient way. And finally, item 4 is the other half of that, where asset management uses resources that are in a wise manner to provide the infrastructure necessary for the community. Innovation and economic development focuses on bringing the dollars in the front door so that we can accomplish all the goals that ultimately the community wants from us. In addition to those, there were 2 quality of life goals that the council added on the list, the first being affordable housing and homelessness. Linking those 2 items, of course, they are very much linked from a policy level, and we'll be talking briefly about some of the items on that list. And then finally, downtown. What are our next steps and how are we going to move that process forward to come to a consensus-driven outcome that the community supports. So starting off with disaster preparedness and public safety, and the council directed that goal includes several different key pieces there. First, disaster preparedness planning, which involves all of the comprehensive works, programs, plans, and documents necessary to make sure we're compliant with federal, state, regional agencies, and to also guide us during an actual event to make sure that we've done all of the pre-planning necessary so we're not actually trying to invent the wheel during the disaster. The second item and the third item relate to preparedness. The first one being staff, basically going through and making sure that all of our staff understand their obligations as disaster service workers, understand their roles during an emergency. Many of them will take on new roles as a part of an emergency operations center. Many will play a version of their current roles, just with different responsibilities during a time of disaster. But understanding how that system works, what their roles are, and making sure that multiple staff are prepared for each of those roles, because we never know when a disaster is going to strike, whether it'll be during business hours. A significant portion of our staff do not live in the city, so essentially how do we run the EOC with the folks that we have here? Depending on the type of disaster, people far away might be in better shape, or people locally might be in better shape. So making sure that staff understands all of those responsibilities and can effectively communicate those and perform during an emergency. Disaster preparedness also has a community education component. In the old days, we used to say that community members should make sure that they're able to fend for themselves for 72 hours. As we've seen in some nationwide disasters of large scale, that time actually needs to be closer to a week. So making sure that all of our residents understand how much food, water, and other preparation would be necessary for them to be able to fend for themselves for a longer period of time should there be a significant disaster. Of course, in California, we think earthquakes in a very large scale. Those can disable transportation systems, power systems, your basic utilities, sewer and water can be disabled for a period of time. So understanding that at the resident level and making sure that those folks who want to have that information and training so that we are a well-prepared community. Additional components of this include an emergency operations center. Our current emergency operations center is a conference room at our police department, but making sure that basically we have the physical area in which to actually prepare and go through our process during an actual disaster. The good news is we are obviously at the front end of building a new facility on the campus, and council directed that a significant component of your community meeting hall actually be an emergency operations center as well. So redoubling that and making certain that that component of that building and that actually is integrated into the overall planning for that. Finally, 2 items related to public safety. The first being public safety technology, including automated license plate readers, both mobile and fixed. Mobile obviously are on an actual patrol car, where the computer essentially scans license plates as it moves throughout the community. That's no different than actually having a real life person do that, simply much more efficient. And it tags essentially significant areas where the officer would need to follow up. In addition to that, safety cameras were part of the technology as well. Certain areas of the community, providing so that dispatch or others have eyes on the street in areas where we have large areas of congregation, such as downtown and other areas of the city. Finally, traffic behavior and enforcement was also part of the goal that the council adopted here, and we'll be moving forward with activities to make sure that both from an enforcement standpoint and from a behavior standpoint that we're doing everything we can with our effective resources to make sure that the community and traffic behavior is causes as little disruption as possible to the community and is safe and efficient as possible. Long-term financial stability. Items on that include essentially a fee study to make sure that the fees we're charging for services where council has directed such things as, for example, development fees for processing, that those not put a burden on existing residents, that people who want to come in and develop and change the community ultimately pay the fair share of processing that. This fee study, of course, is different than impact fee studies, but is an important piece of what we need to do. Debt policy and compensation policies are two things that the council will be weighing in on and are part of the work program here to make certain that both of those meet your standards and we are being transparent and informative to the public on both our debt policy, essentially how much and how do we carry that debt, as well as our compensation policy, essentially how do we compensate our employees throughout the organization and what guides that practice. Financial software update and core services alignment with general fund resources. The core services is to make certain that indeed we do have very limited resources as a city and to make sure that the things that we are spending our general fund dollars on do align with our core mission on that. So examples where the council has dealt with this over a period of time would, of course, involve things like Springtown Golf Course, where essentially significant resources were serving an extremely small group of, in that case, golfers, but essentially taking that sort of look at all of our operations, making sure that when this public is investing significant tax dollars, that benefit basically accrues widely back out to the public. To make sure that we're not essentially spending tax dollars on a very limited area that's not a core service. Finally, infrastructure and replacement. This is the money side of that. So you saw in one of your other goals, your upcoming goal, that essentially making sure that we study all of those assets, make sure that we understand how they're functioning, what the best way to maintain them, and how to maintain them. This essentially is the financial planning and policies that need to then happen to make sure that those resources that you direct to be there are used in the most effective and efficient way. Such things as how and when we take on debt to deal with those sorts of things, whether we move larger projects around in time to take a part of economic cycles. All of those become part of what happens on the money side. Moving on to asset management, you are a couple of years into this particular goal, and the council directed that we continue on this process. This is a comprehensive look at all of our infrastructure systems, sidewalks, walls, streets, street lights, all of the objects that the public owns, from parking garages to public buildings. How are they ultimately being maintained? What is their life cycle cost? How do we effectively both replace systems and the overall assets to make sure that those core assets are there and continue to function, as well as that they're maintained in a way that minimizes long-term life cycle costs. So that involves essentially understanding what we have, what the condition of those objects are, and then developing strategies over the long term to ultimately maintain those in an effective way. Innovation and economic development deals with several interrelated items. You all created the Department of Innovation and Economic Development to integrate several functions that we were carrying out in separate parts of the organization and place special emphasis on those. The first is an innovation economy, which focuses on individual entrepreneurs, making sure that we have the culture and essentially the background necessary to have those folks succeed in the community. An example of this would be your support for iGate and The Switch, which is a physical place where we basically bring together people to make sure that we help those folks who want to turn great ideas into great businesses. At the other end of the spectrum is traditional business attraction and retention. Rather than focusing on the individual entrepreneur and creating a new business, this is essentially drawing businesses to us, ones that exist, and helping those that are already here grow. So it's a focus on the business end of the equation rather than the individual or entrepreneur level. And actually linking those two functions, traditional business attraction and retention, to innovation, sometimes there can be some neat synergies between those two groups, because many times businesses like to acquire ideas. And in fact, we see that even here in the Tri-Valley, where occasionally a new business technology is actually absorbed by an existing business here to the benefit of both. Workforce development and attraction, again, making sure that our workers have the skills necessary and working with those who provide skills, such as Las Positas College, making sure that the skills that our businesses find necessary are actually being provided, that skill building is being provided locally here. So that's one of the things that we focus on with our partners out there. And then, of course, workforce attraction, making sure that we are a truly attractive place to live and work. It's a competitive environment out there for the very best workers. One of the things we have going for us here in Livermore is we are Livermore. We are not someplace in West Texas where the prices will be lower. We always lose on price, but what we want to make sure is that we win on quality of life and the entire package of things that we can deliver as a destination for both businesses and individuals. Finally, tourism attraction and promotion is a piece of the puzzle to make sure that we leverage all of those wonderful things we have for our local residents here. One of the ways to improve those is to share those with others, and we can provide amenities that we couldn't otherwise if we didn't add tourism attraction and promotion. Obviously, some of our main businesses depend very much on tourism, and we have a long history of interacting with our wine growers and others into making sure that we attract and retain people here as visitors as well. Affordable housing and homelessness links the two items. The entire Bay Area and all of Northern California and coastal California has a severe housing shortage. We are no different here. Being part of the Bay Area, we feel that in increased rents and housing costs relative to the nation at large. That at one point, one of its outcomes has to do with that when people are living paycheck to paycheck and have a major life event, sometimes they get sick, sometimes they lose their job. It's much more likely that they fall into homelessness when housing prices are extremely high, and essentially that creates a drain on resources. This essentially recognizes that essentially homelessness, one of the best ways to deal with that is to actually house people first and wrap the necessary services around them. For some people, that's very little services. Essentially, the housing is the main thing to create that stability. For others, they'll need many more services. The Housing First model deals with that and is part of your goals and priorities. And you have already directed us to add a limited duration staff person to begin working on this. We also understand that essentially for this model to work, we need to both make sure that housing is available out of our existing housing stock and create new housing stock. You've recently seen several affordable projects before you in this spring, and this program over the next 2 years continues that process as we move forward, dealing with the entire myriad of financing as well as going through the development process with qualified partners to make sure that these projects are great additions to the community as we move forward. Finally, downtown, it rounds out your list of goals here with the appointment of your 19-member steering committee to help us design an outreach process that truly will gauge the overall community's consideration of what they want to achieve downtown. Basically enhancing our vibrancy by completing critical projects that the community not only accepts, but they actually want to see in their downtown. So this is a challenging project. We've been at it for several years. Our downtown revitalization began with our 1976 general plan and actually the realignment of the railroad tracks downtown. So we are continuing this process that we've been at for over 40 years. These last stages, of course, are very exciting as we've seen wonderful transformations in the downtown in the past 15 years. This will continue that process, dealing with figuring out where do we place a hotel and what does that serve, what happens with the sites we've identified downtown as our catalyst sites, how do we make sure that we're getting broad and deep community input to make sure that there's support for these sorts of things. And then essentially, are there small projects that we can do that are outside those particular lands to be developed that the city has that might enhance other things going on there. So your work program includes things like lighting projects, shade structure projects. Livermore Memorial Plaza, which you gave direction to us tonight on, are all part of a, don't laugh, but essentially moving the entire process forward there. Our downtown obviously is a wonderful place there. So the great news is we have a tremendous amount of focus from the community on that area. And of course, that's one of the challenges when you have thousands of folks helping with the design process, coming to a consensus where people are excited about moving forward is your last item here. And then finally, making sure that we preserve the very best of what we have in the downtown, that as we're redeveloping, that we do that sensitively and make sure that existing historic buildings are preserved and enhanced, that the things that go around them ultimately make for great compatibility as we move forward. So those are essentially your downtown priorities. Your work program is in your staff report there. You do have a supplemental on there for the innovation and economic development. We inadvertently gave you one version prior to what was actually supposed to be released there, so that last version included a little more detail on some of our innovation and economic development activities there. Certainly available to answer questions about any of the work program items, including any of the schedule there. But the items before you are sort of what your staff recommends and believes are the tasks that we can accomplish during the next 2-year period. Some of these goals obviously stretch out over many years, and your work program essentially aligns with essentially the term of this council as it sits and also your upcoming budget. These items will ultimately be used to help develop your budget, and when we come to you in May with that budget, we'll be reporting to you essentially where those items tie back into the budget. And with that, available for questions.
Questions, Councilmember Carling.
So what's the status of the limited duration staff person for the homeless work?
My recollection is we were out basically recruiting that. Do we have a timeline on the next steps in that?
I would expect to go through and be able to hire within the next couple months.
So, yeah, we're 45 days out from having a person on board.
Got a comment?
Councilmember Warner?
So I think you captured our discussions very well, and it would be pretty incredible if you get all of this done to the high, the high quality we expect. But
Time on budget.
Yeah, well, certainly on budget. We got a finance committee now, so I think it was very good, and I think these are the right things, and I think they're in the right order of getting it done, and I'm looking forward to seeing you make it happen.
Okay. This morning, the county actually held a workshop on resources for the homeless, and so perhaps we can, they have more creative funding mechanisms than we have, and so there's also the bond money that's available as well. So certainly we can partner with Alameda County as we continue to try to find resources to solve the issues around homelessness in the region. And bringing everybody on board with that. Also, with respect to economic development, back in the day, we used to have this wonderful thing, these tourism and economic development grants. So when there were projects that were coming in for tourism, for example, one of the first recipients of that was Art Walk, and that brought thousands of people into the downtown. So there's a real incentive to throw a few dollars in seed money to some of these projects that would be bringing in significant economic development by enhancing tourism. So since we're talking about the budget process, maybe revisit that and restore some of those the tourism grants.
And you do actually have some of those grants still in your budget, but we will certainly highlight that for your consideration when you bring the budget in front of you.
And yeah, but very aggressive timeline, but I think it looks good. This is just by consensus.
We could, if you wanted to do it at some point, if your comments are complete, a motion to accept the work program, and essentially our path forward on that is that we do ultimately report back to you quarterly on our progress on that, and obviously occasionally deadlines or other things need to be adjusted as we move forward, but that'll basically come in your quarterly updates.
And I do have a speaker card here, Jeff Caskey.
Thanks very much, and it's a great set of goals, and wish you the best of luck for us in Livermore. I did notice there was didn't seem to be a lot on sort of culture, quality of life, and the environment in there. It was a great set of goals. The great thing about priorities is that not everything can be #1 priority, but I think that something about the Livermore environment in particular, I think issue that will be coming up within the next 2 years to be talked about. In fact, it's already being talked about now with a development request on the south side, is our urban growth boundary. Position on the urban growth boundary, how we deal with the, I could say, assaults on, or at least on the concerns that we might have about the urban growth boundary, both on the north side, controlled through the county, and on the south side, as we're seeing on some of the requests now. These are going to be very important to the residents of Livermore who so strongly supported the urban growth boundary, and I'd like to see something like that included within your goals for the next couple of years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right.
Can I make a comment?
Pardon me?
Can I make a, so
certainly.
so first of all, I'll move that we accept this work plan. And then,
do we have a second?
Second.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Okay, Councilmember Carling, second.
now
discussion on the motion.
Discussion. So I think this is very the right set of goals, priorities. With respect to the question about the urban growth boundary and the environment and everything, in part of our discussion, we said that that's kind of part of our DNA, and these are goals that we expect the staff to help us accomplish. So we've already established that this is what we're trying to do in the city with respect to the open space and the urban growth boundary. So we don't have any particular objectives beyond maintaining what we have and assuring that, and that's already assumed in the direction. So I personally didn't feel the need to call it out again explicitly, because if you have too much, then it's hard to focus on anything. So these are the things that we're really trying to get something done on.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? Passed unanimously. So you got a lot of work ahead of you. So thank you very much. All right. Moving on to committee reports and matters initiated. Let's go start at Councilmember Coomber.
Well, just today I had a LAVTA meeting. LAVTA helped me out with the acronym because it's the first one I've attended.
The Projects and Services Committee.
That's what I was thinking, projects. So we had a real good discussion about the new look of Wheels buses and rebranding Wheels and trying to narrow the distinction when a bus says Wheels and a bus says Rapid, that they are both the same entity, and thinking of some way to combine them. I really love the new color schemes that will be coming out. They've tried to make some branding changes on the Wheels side of thing, as they did for the Rapid, the buses, the express buses, as we used to call them. And we had a very lively discussion around that, but I look forward to the progress being made very soon there. They've got their marching orders with the new colors on the buses, and they're really, really striking. I don't have a matter to initiate so much, but I did want to make a comment for those who didn't see me and make it to the San Francisco Green Film Festival this weekend. The movie Four Wheel Bob. It's about me and my forays off into the Sierra, cursing out rocks and small animals who try and waylay me. We premiered to a packed house and just rave reviews. So my next trip is getting it here in town. We're done with the film festival circuit, and it's available for distribution. So I'll be meeting with some theater people tomorrow, see if we can arrange a date or two to get it out there. I think you'll really like it. It's kind of fun.
Okay, Councilmember Carling.
Yeah, I had nothing to report. I missed a couple of meetings. I had a family emergency that I had to take care of over the last couple of weeks, so I missed a couple of meetings.
But you were working on the important stuff.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Councilmember Warner.
A couple of things. Along with Councilmember Carling, we did the advisory body interviews the other night, and it's always so it's just really amazing, the number of good people we've gotten in the city that want to help. And so again, we went through a number of people that were really all very qualified, and we had to make one or two hard decisions, but and that's tough. But we've got very good people. The other thing is I went to a LAVA board meeting recently, and so I'm the new chairman of that. So that'll be keep me occupied, I guess.
So everything's your fault now.
Yeah, it'll be my fault. And it just occurred to me, matters initiated. I'll just say this: we were on a subcommittee meeting, Councilmember Carly and I, and with the city staff, and we got the memo on the dress code because we were both in blue jeans, and I think we're matching. And I was just wondering. Do we have a dress code for the city staff? Because everybody's running around in coats and ties a lot of times, and it's not clear to me that it's required. And so I don't know if it's matters initiated, but in other places I've worked, I actually got the dress code changed. So
yeah, that's the joy of the policy versus the administrative side of the house.
Okay.
So that one, unless you want to make a law, we'd probably keep that one on the administrative side of the house. It's a fairly soft code, but the managers generally are expected to sort of look like managers. Now maybe we'll have to continue to evolve this, and it's way different than when I came 30 years ago as far as what are expected.
You go to Silicon Valley, everybody's running around in jeans there. So.
You're lucky if they've got long pants on, yes. So you're correct.
Vice Chair Spadowski.
Sure. On the 12th of this month, I attended the Altamont Regional Rail Working Group, the last meeting of the ARG. That acronym is now gone. Now they are the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Rail Advisory Authority. So I don't know what that is. It's too late to try and pronounce that acronym. But we did finalize some recommended language for the legislation. And I'd like to thank Assemblymember Baker for showing up and guiding us through that process. Later on that day, had the East Bay Community Choice Energy meeting over in Hayward, where we finalized some contracts with some vendors and consultants to help us through this process. Then on the 17th, had the Tri-Valley Transportation Commission meeting. It looks like we're almost all the way through the A projects and starting to move on to the B listed projects. So that is a group that's formed by all the cities in the Tri-Valley, and we pool resources and various fees together to do projects for the greater good. So it's a great group, and we knocked through the first round of projects and starting on the second round and possibly creating a C list in the future. So that'll be interesting. One other note: a couple weeks ago, we did have a finance committee meeting and discussed some of the aspects of downtown, in particular, how downtown is defined. So that's something that will be discussed later on with, I guess, the other group produced our findings. So very, very interesting. Other than that, no matters initiated. I think you all dress finely, so keep up maybe more cowboy hats and boots. But the city manager, usually on Fridays, you see him, it's like, wow, he does wear a cowboy hat and boots.
Okay, now I recall that we actually came up with the name the Alameda San Joaquin Regional Rail Authority, but the problem is 758. The title of that is the Tri-Valley San Joaquin, but either way, we still got top billing. But however, that passed out of committee today, 12-0. So that was a huge victory, and certainly thanks to Catherine Baker and Assemblymember Eggman for being the champions on that. That's a huge lift, because this way we can start to drive this project ourselves. So
now I remembered, because it's ASRA. So that was the ASRA, because I think they dropped the J.
Yeah, but anyway. The Altamont San Joaquin Regional Rail Authority. So that same afternoon, we had the Alameda County Mayor's Conference, and we actually had a tour of Government Island, and look into the Coast Guard facilities that are there, and also an update from the League of California Cities. We had the retirement for Sandy Basso, who's put in a lot of years and a lot of great work for the Livermore Pleasant Fire Department. In fact, she started in the Livermore Fire Department. And
29 years.
Combined. I wasn't going to say, but and then also on the 19th we had, as Councilmember Werner pointed out, the LAVMA meeting. On the 21st was the actually on the 20th, Sandia had a very interesting retrospective, and I was asked to speak there at the handoff as Lockheed Martin is handing off the laboratory operations to Honeywell, and the accomplishments over those decades were nothing short of remarkable. The 21st, we had the LAFCO Policy Subcommittee, and we are putting the boundaries on developing a workshop for the entire LAFCO committee on some of the major policy issues that are going to be coming up in the near future. That evening, there was a red, blue, and gold. There's an event that the Knights of Columbus put on to recognize the emergency service workers in the Tri-Valley, and they recognized from our Livermore Police Department Dan Cabral and Greg Stanford for being remarkable public servants in the emergency services arena. And of course, the 22nd was the March for Science, and that was very exciting. Had close to 2,000 people at Livermore High School, and talking about the value of science and how it continues to contribute to our quality of life. So that was an honor to be a participant in that. And finally, I'd like to adjourn this meeting recognizing Steve McCree, who passed away recently. He was the founder and operator of Shepherd's Gate here in the community, and at his memorial service, his wife Carla mentioned that she was very heartened by all the support that she had from all the people that had expressed their sorrow for her loss, and she said, "And I am also sorry for your loss." Because the loss of Steve McCree in this community is huge. He has helped thousands of abused women and children and brought them shelter and safety at Shepherd's Gate, and helped them get their lives back on track. So his passing leaves a huge hole in this community, because he was truly dedicated to helping people in Livermore, and they opened up another campus in Brentwood. So with that, I would like to adjourn this meeting in memory and honor of Steve McCree from Shepherd's Gate. That meeting is adjourned.